you're having a great Monday. I'm Steve Tyrell, and I know I am. You're listening to KJazz 88.1, listener-supported public radio. That was Grace Kelly and John Batiste with Lemons Make Lemonade. Grace is a great young artist. I met when she was 15 years old, and she's just all over the world now. I thought she'd gone to Europe this summer. Did you see that, John?
Yeah, I did.
And I'm very happy for her. She deserves all the good stuff. Artie Shaw was before Grace with his version of It's Wonderful. And up next after the break is Count Basie and Brother Ray. And they're busted. And you'll hear all about it when we get back, right after the break. Man, we can own them 5 till they catch their stride.
This is Nick Tyler. Join me this week for my broadcast coverage of the 38th Montreal International Jazz Festival. We'll feature festival happenings and comments from some of the performers and people who make the festival happen. Join me, Nick Tyler, for coverage of the 38th Montreal International Jazz Festival midday this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday right here on KJazz 88.1, listener-supported public radio.
Hi, this is Christian McBride. Thank you for supporting KJazz 88.1.
My bills are all due, and the baby needs shoes, and I'm busted. I got a cow that went dry and a hen that won't lay. A big stack of bills that gets bigger each day. The county's gonna haul my belongings away 'cause I'm busted. I went to my brother to ask for a loan 'cause I was busted. My brother said there ain't a thing I can do. My wife and my kids are all down with the flu. And I was just thinking about calling on you, and I'm busted. Well, I am no thief, but a man can go wrong when he's busted. The fields are all bare and the cotton won't grow. Me and my family got to pack up and go. But I'll make a living just where I don't know, 'cause I'm busted. I'm broke. No bread. I mean, like nothing. Forget it.
At 88.1, this is listener-supported public radio, KKJZ, Long Beach, Los Angeles, and KKJZ HD1, Long Beach, a service of California State University, Long Beach, also worldwide at jazzandblues.org.
It's a great day for all this great music here on K-Jazz. Steve Tyrell with you. And we're going to start this last hour off with Patty Austin in her wonderful Patrick Williams arrangement of Satin Doll.
Cigarette holder, which wigs me over his shoulder. He digs me, he's catting that satin down. Baby, can we go out stepping careful, amigo? You're tripping, speaks Latin, that satin down. Well, he's nobody's fool, so I'm playing it cool as can be. I'm gonna give it a whirl, but I ain't got no guy catching me. Switch your only telephone number. Well, you know I'm doing my rumbas with love and that my satin down. Telephone number, baby, you know I'm doing my rumbas with Uno and that my satin down. Speak Latin, that satin down. Oh, Captain, that's night and day, you are.
Good evening. Welcome to the City of Seal Beach City Council meeting for June 26, 2017. I'm calling this meeting to order, and Councilmember Moore, could you lead us in the flag salute, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can we have the council roll call, please?
Mayor Masalave.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Vera Papa.
Here.
Councilmember Deaton. Here. Councilmember Moore.
Here.
Councilmember Sistarsik. All present.
Thank you. By motion of the City Council, this is the time to notify the public of any changes to the agenda and/or rearrange the order of the agenda. Is there anyone on the council that wants to pull an item off the council for special review?
Mayor Masalave.
Yes.
If there's no request to pull items, I do have some items to read into the record that were distributed after the posting of the agenda.
Okay, do I have to say anything else?
No, I just read them.
Okay, good.
There was distributed information today regarding changes to item B, attachment A, page 4, adding section 3.20.030, item N. There was a PowerPoint presentation distributed regarding the 2017-18 budget, PowerPoint presentation regarding item B, purchasing system and contract administration update, email communications between council members and staff regarding questions on the agenda, and email communications from Robert Goldberg regarding items on the agenda.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is presentations and recognitions. And first off, we would like to introduce the County of Orange Fire Authority Division Chief Acosta, to be presented by one of our favorite fire chiefs, Ken Cruz.
Mayor and council, staff members, and the public, I'm Ken Cruz, and it's been my honor to serve you as your division chief for nearly 3 years now. And it's been one of the highlights of my career. I've developed just some great relationships here, had some wonderful times. I love the city. You guys do a wonderful job, and I'm very proud to have served with you. Being called back into headquarters for a new position that we're standing up. And regretfully, I'll be leaving, but one of the things that I'm happy about is that I did have some input into my replacement. So I will have Robert introduce himself, but at least he's a familiar face for you, and I know you'll be in good hands when I leave, and I'll still be available from headquarters to help with Robert and any questions you still may have. So we'll make this transition seamless for you, but I'm going to have Robert introduce himself and talk about his background.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I started my career 27 years ago at Old Station 48 as a paramedic there. I spent about 15 years of my career in the city of Seal Beach. I have established relationships with your police chief, Bowles, and many of the staff here. So I feel very comfortable working in this city. I know the city very well. I lived in the city for a few years at one time. So I just have some vested interest. I'm really looking forward to participating and trying to fill these big shoes that Ken has left for me to fill. But thank you very much for the opportunity, and I hope I don't let you down. So.
Welcome. It'll be good to see you frequently. Thank you, Ken. The next is the Orange County Water District. Can we have the Board Director, Phil Anthony, come up, please?
Thank you, Robin. Madam Mayor, council members. Yes, my name is Philip Anthony. I am your elected representative on the board of the Orange County Water District, and that's an extremely important thing because we all like our water. And OCWD is a local government agency. We were formed back in 1933 by a special act of the state legislature with a very big job to protect the groundwater basin and also to protect our rights in the water coming out of the Santa Ana River. We provide most of the water for you and 19 other entities in our part of Orange County, and also we provide 75% of your total water supply. That's a lot of water. And the important thing is the groundwater is better and it's cheaper, a lot cheaper than the imported water. The rest of your water you have to buy from Metropolitan, imported from up north of the Colorado River. But the groundwater is our biggest supply, it's our best supply, and by far less costly. I wanted to talk tonight about a big project happening right here in your city. We're working in, this is, again, the map of the district, and of course, not sure how to run this thing. Seal Beach is right there in the lower left corner, right there. And right here is the river that comes in. There's another big river over here, the Santa Ana River. And where these rivers come through the basin to the ocean, they tend to let the ocean water come in underground and contaminate our water basin. Now, there's a barrier that has been there since 1960-something, I think. And we have another one over here in the Santa Ana River basin, a very big barrier there. But this is the one that affects Seal Beach. And right now we're busily trying to make it better because that barrier, the black line is the county line. Seal Beach over here, of course. This is Westminster Boulevard, Rossmore up in here. But you can see these green squares are the wells. In L.A., who sort of led building this thing years ago, they took care of themselves. Look how close those wells are together to keep the water from intruding into L.A. But on our side, the Seal Beach, Orange County side, there's just a few wells scattered out. And as you would expect, the nasty seawater is coming through here. These lines represent chloride concentration. The bad thing is that you've got two of your big production wells right over here. And if that seawater hits those wells, it's going to go right into the wells and it's going to kill them. They'll be taken out of service. So we're busily trying to improve this barrier, and the work is underway. What we're doing is we're putting in more wells on the Orange County Seal Beach side. 8 new locations, a total of 17 wells in those 8 locations, plus some monitoring wells. So you can see these dark things now are the new well sites, and the wells are drilled, just finished. We've still got to put the inside in the wells to make them work. But this is right next to Leisure World. And we've had a number of meetings with these folks, to keep them up on what we're doing, to make sure we don't cause any problems. When the wells were being drilled, there were special sound barricades up to protect the citizens. So we had very, very few complaints, but the wells, the nasty part of the work is over, and now it's just a matter of putting the plumbing inside the wells. So that's going to, I think, protect your wells over here and stop that seawater from coming from the ocean into Seal Beach and Orange County. And that work's coming along very well. It should be done by the end of the year. We'll turn on those injection wells and keep the seawater out and protect your water supply and your wells. Let's take a look at the groundwater basin just to show what really makes it work. This is a big cross-section through the basin, roughly along the Santa Ana River. But you can see up here on the far right are the mountains. The Santa Ana River comes down here from Prado Dam, Anaheim up here. This area, the groundwater is very porous. The ground surface is very porous all the way down, and we have injection basins up here that let the water percolate in and feed water into the aquifers. But then you come down along Santa Ana, Seal Beach, Honey Beach down here, and again, the top couple layers of aquifer connect with the ocean, and that's what caused that problem we just talked about. Seawater creeps in, and we inject water here to keep the seawater back, because most of your big production wells come down to the principal aquifer and pump out that very nice groundwater. This is the supply of water in the basin. This line shows how full the basin is. Up here, the basin is full. Down here, it's right now we're over 300,000 acre-feet low from the ideal place. But back in the 60s and 70s, when the population was growing, agriculture was still pumping water, the groundwater basin went way down, and the seawater started coming in. It came in several miles some places. Seal Beach, I don't know how many wells, you might have lost a few of your wells back then, but Newport Beach lost all their wells, Huntington Beach lost several close to the ocean. So we try to keep the basin up here near this target overdraft so there's plenty of water and enough room in case we get a big rain, we can catch the water. But we're down low, but we're buying more water from Metropolitan this year to try to fill it up as much as we can. Here's where the water comes from. These are mountains up here, and this is supposed to be Prado Dam. The water comes down from the mountains, down Santa Ana River, and we're allowed, by working with the Corps of Engineers, to store some water behind the dam at the end of a storm, so we can let this water out slow enough it can come down and we can capture it. During a storm, the water comes through so fast we can't catch it. Most goes to the ocean. So we're getting free water up here behind the storms with the cooperation of the Corps of Engineers. This shows coming down the river farther now. This is up in the Anaheim Orange area where all of our percolation basins are. The river comes down here. This is the 91 freeway. And all these basins you see up here are really percolation ponds, so we can put river water and some imported water we buy in there too. It soaks into the ground and then comes down to you. It takes months, but it eventually gets down to you. Our newest, biggest project you might have heard about is the ground replenishment system. We're into this now 10 years, but we built the world's largest recycling project that takes treated wastewater over to us and purifies it to almost distilled water, and we're using this as a new source to put water in the basin so we keep the basin full enough for you. It started out it's now 100 million gallons a day, treated wastewater. It's enough water for 850,000 people. It's been operational since 2008. We increased it 30 million gallons a day in 2015. It's the largest potable reuse project in the world, and it's just a few miles down the road in Fountain Valley. And I invite you to come and see it someday. The benefits of GRS, it's a new local water supply. It doesn't depend on the weather or the imported water. Reuses the wasted resource, increases water reliability. It costs far less than imported water and uses only half the energy than it takes to bring water down from Northern California. And it's so pure it improves the quality of the groundwater basin. We're planning on the final expansion up to 130 million gallons a day. The engineering work is done. We've got bids out right now for the final design work, and it should be done in the fourth quarter of 2021. That'll take it up to 130 MGD, enough water for over 1 million people. So it's a tremendous support to our water supply, your water supply. GRS is world famous. It's received all kinds of awards, but the main thing I want to do is invite you to come and see it. We're welcome tours. We've had thousands of people tour it. If any of you people, your friends, any of your city organizations or schools want to come and have a tour, we welcome you. It's real nice. It's fun. You learn a lot. And we'll even feed you sometimes. Anyway, that's it for tonight. If you have any questions, I'm available, and you can contact me anytime if you want any help with your water problems that we are involved in.
Thank
Questions?
you. Thank you. Are there any questions? I'd just like to let people know that they do have once a month a meeting. Unfortunately, it's at 7:30 in the morning, and it goes till about 9.
You're talking about our meeting?
Yeah, your meeting.
Yeah, we have a friendly meeting for all of you.
Oh, it's very friendly.
Water producers.
Because you can talk at 7:30
Well, your staff
in the
people
morning.
are always there. But we have regular board meetings twice a month too. But please come and visit us. We'd love to see you anytime and tour the plant. It's like I say, it's the biggest one in the world. So thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Great site. Thank you.
See you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have the big reveal. The Runsfield Beach grant recognition. Is Greg Phillips here? No. Deb Manchin is here.
Greg couldn't make it tonight, so I'm speaking on behalf of the board. So thank you for having us, Mayor, Council, staff, and public. This should be kind of a quick, do I have a? It's a community clicker. You want to just handle it for me?
I will.
Okay.
It's a $100 deposit on that.
All right. Well, we're here tonight to just say thank you and I know we revealed how much we were giving away, but as of tonight, you may have seen us out front, and we were giving away the money, literally. And so we just thought we'd do a little 5-minute presentation and kind of show you where it went. Okay. So, okay, I'm clicking. Oh, it's upside down. Okay. So on April 8th, we hosted more than 4,000 runners and walkers and over 500 volunteers. And we always like to have a few new additions every year. And so ours this year were met with a lot of enthusiasm. The finisher medals, it was exciting to see everybody after the race, thousands of people walking around with medals. That was kind of fun for me. The social media step and repeat photo backdrop. Oh, I went back. And our life-size Sammy the cutout poster, Sammy the Seal cutout poster, was a lot of fun for the kids in the fun zone. So, and the social media step and repeat was a huge hit from about 6 in the morning until we put it down. We had to wait for people to quit taking pictures. So a really big hit. And this, if you could, thank you. just, this is courtesy of SBTV3. Kind of a great aerial shot and video. Neat little shot of the start line. All right, so for 2017, in grant awards, we gave $108,554, and that represented 63 grants over 58 organizations. In directors' awards this year, we gave out $12,000, representing 20 awards and 19 organizations, for a total of $120,554, representing 83 grants or awards and 77 organizations. And the following city organizations received funding: SB Recreation Department, $1,500, SB Marine Safety Department, $4,330, and the SBPD programs, $8,105, for a total of $13,935. So that brings us to our total over the last 15 years of $1,573,064 in 15 years. So where do the funds go? I don't know if you can see that very well. I brought this just in case. LAUSD and other local schools, $60,000 or $60,335, representing 50% of the funds. The City of Seal Beach Police Department, Marine Safety, $13,935, representing 12%. And other Seal Beach-based organizations, $25,264 for 21%, and other LoSal-based organizations, $21,020, representing 17%. So we just want to thank everyone who had anything to do with our success and comes back every year and helps us, our generous sponsors, our engaged community, our volunteers who come back every year, and we couldn't do it without the endearing support of Seal Beach and the city. So thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you in 2018. Thank you.
Thank you. Lots of money. Okay, the next item on the agenda is oral communications. At this time, members of the public may address the council regarding any items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the council cannot discuss or take action on any items not on the agenda unless authorized by law. Matters not on the agenda may, at the council's discretion, be referred to the city manager and placed on a future agenda. Those members of the public wishing to speak are asked to come forward to the microphone and state their name for the record. All speakers will be limited to a period of 5 minutes. Any documents for review should be presented to the city clerk for distribution. Would anyone like to speak? Shannon?
Good evening, council members and staff. My name is Shannon Switzer. I'm here this evening on behalf of the Seal Beach Chamber of Commerce, and just wanted to give one last reminder that our summer concert series, which is sponsored by the Chamber, is here. It begins next Wednesday, July 5th, directly after the holiday, and continues for 8 weeks down at the Eisenhower Park, adjacent to the pier. So we kick off the summer concert series with the Kelly Ray Band, and they are a country feel kind of band. And then we have returning a bunch of our classic favorites. So both Beatles and U2 tribute bands, the Elm Street Band, and then a couple of new bands that are being thrown in the mix this year. So we run 8 weeks consecutively, every Wednesday. Concerts are from 6 to 8. So please come down and join us. Everyone in the community is welcome. We encourage everyone to join. Just a couple of housekeeping items. They do get pretty full, so keep that in mind. Get there as early as you can to enjoy it, but you are not allowed to leave items unattended prior to 4 p.m. So please don't do that. Just means we have to pick them up and cart them away to give everyone sort of an equal shot at enjoying themselves. So keep that in mind, and we encourage everyone to come down and join us. So thank you.
Thank you. It's a great event every year. We encourage you all to enjoy the music. Anyone else like to speak?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Leland Jay, Seal Beach resident of 11 years, Rossmore resident of 29 years, and I'm currently a Rossmore resident. Here, of course, to speak to you about the proposed LA Fitness. And coming here to ask you if you could honestly ask yourselves or imagine the gym is at the proposed site and you're on your way coming from the bridge, approaching St. Cloud, and essentially you've got 2 routes to go, and you can see at St. Cloud you've got a traffic light, and then beyond that you've got another traffic light at the In-N-Out Burger, and you've got another traffic light at Panera Bread, and then you'd have to wait in the queue to make the left turn at Panera Bread, and then wait in the queue before the stop sign at Sprouts. And I realize the mitigation is to widen that, but if you've got pedestrian traffic at from Sprouts to Panera, you'll have to wait there until the stop sign. Beyond that, then you're in the back of the parking lot, and you can park. Or your second option would be, if you hit that green arrow, that left turn on St. Cloud, you've got a 2-lane residential road and 1 stop sign. Now, those of us who live in Rossmore, we always stop at that stop sign. And the reason is because more often than not, there's an Orange County Sheriff car parked, hiding right there by the condos next to the wall. But you have to ask yourself, why is he or she there so often? It's because people who are not from the area or who don't know any better, they blow through that stop sign all the time. Now, I grew up in Rossmore. My mom still lives in the house I grew up in. She goes for walks right in that neighborhood, right around that Copa de Oro, Montecito stop sign. When I was a kid, we rode bikes all over the place. Many people don't know this, but when I was a kid, the intersection of Foster and Copa de Oro, that was a blind intersection. If you're not familiar with those streets, they're major arteries for our community. Copa de Oro then comes out to Montecito. When I was in middle school, I went to Oak Middle School. And there was a girl, an acquaintance of mine, who was involved in a serious car accident there, and she was paralyzed from the waist down. And it was after that incident that now we have the 4-way stop, which we have currently. I'm here to tell you that, make no mistake, if this gym goes in, there will be a diversion of hundreds, perhaps 1,000 car trips a day to that 1 stop sign at Copa de Oro. Where we live, my girls won't be riding their bikes to school from that route because we live differently, but they have friends that will. My older daughter has a good friend of hers that lives in the condos there, right there, not Bridge Creek, but I don't know the name, the next one over. And then just think about gym patrons, right? If you're early up in the morning, you're rushing to the gym to get your workout in before you go to work. You're leaving the gym in a hurry to get to work. You're after work, you're in a hurry to get to the gym to get your workout in. You're leaving the gym in a hurry to get home to have dinner with your family. Patrons are not thinking about shopping in the center, in my opinion. The last thing I want to tell you, though, is that I know Rossmore residents have been coming to you. Many are passionate, some emotional, some perhaps even angry. Please understand that many of us are coming to you because we're scared. We're scared for the safety of our children. And if you could just think about it when you're at night, honestly, you got 2 routes to go, you're in a hurry, 3 traffic lights, left turn in the heart of that center stop sign at Sprouts, or left turn, residential road, 1 stop sign. Time's up? That was my last point. But
1 minute, please.
Okay. I want to thank you for the time. and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for your comments. Next.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and staff. Robert Goldberg. I'd like to speak regarding item B, which is a proposed revision of the ordinance regarding our purchasing system. I did send some comments and questions to you all and staff over the weekend, and I'd just like to highlight a couple of the points that I made. The first has to do with the section that exempts purchases from bidding. The current municipal code has several exemptions there, including the first one is that purchases made during an emergency would be exempt from bidding. The proposal that you have before you adds another new section related to emergencies. This section specifically says that purchases made in preparation for an anticipated local emergency may be waived from bidding. I understand the purpose of this and the concept and the desirability of it, but I think it duplicates what we already have, because we already have a section in the code 3.25 that deals with local emergencies and local powers. And under that section, the city manager can declare an emergency when necessary, even when you guys are not in session. And that section 3.5 allows the city manager to purchase anything that she or he needs at fair market price, or even commandeer supplies if the seller won't sell them. And the definitions of an emergency for section 325 actually defines an emergency as an actual or threatened existence of conditions of disaster. So under that definition of emergency, which includes the threat of disaster, I think that the city manager currently has the authority under 3.25 to protect the city, to react proactively if need be, to make purchases without bidding to protect us. An example would be, we've all been through all the disasters last winter with the storm drains, et cetera. And the way 325 is written now would certainly could cover rental of storm pumps if the weatherman says we're going to have a 300-year storm and Director of Public Works feels that we need extra storm pumps. So 325 already covers that. 325 specifies that the city manager can declare this emergency and then has to present this declaration within 7 days to the council for ratification. So that's where the council control comes in, is that it has to be brought to you and the public in 7 days. That's the existing code. This new section, and again I emphasize this is new because that process is different in the new section. In the new section there's not a 7-day requirement to report to you. In this new section, the city manager just has to report to you at your next council meeting. So this is different than what we have right now in that the reporting isn't as speedy as we have currently under 325. So personally, I don't understand why this is necessary. I think it's covered by 325, and I think 325 gives the council and the public a faster reporting. If you all decide to leave this section in, where the city manager has to report to you at the next council meeting, one of the things that you
have a minute.
Yeah, one of the things that's got to be clear is when does the clock start? Does the clock start when those goods are delivered, or does the clock start when we get the bill from the contractor, or does the clock start when we actually cut the check? That's come up in the past, and that would be important to clarify if you're going to leave this section in. Finally, same section about waiving a bidding in section D here, 30 30D, there's a long discussion, or I shouldn't say long discussion, but several sentence discussion about the city manager's authority to make purchases. And that's totally unrelated to bidding. It's got nothing to do with bidding. It has to do with her authority under Charter Section 420 and Resolution 6384. I don't think that should be in the bidding section. I wouldn't put that in this section at all. But if you do, that needs a totally different section. And the title there is, city manager's authority to make purchases. That's a different title, different section. It has nothing to do with bidding. Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Mayor, council members.
It'll bend down just
a little bit more. Okay. My name is Laurel Wilson. I'm here from Leisure World. It's my first time at a council meeting, so be patient with me, please. Recently discovered climate action plans and community choice energy. See how recent. I'm so excited about this. I looked at the climate action plan for San Diego, and I've also, and there were so many interesting things on there, and they had great support, and it's really exciting. And then throughout San Diego County, since they had their plan in place, it's just spread. And I'm sure you're aware of this, but it's new to me. And just looking at the state and seeing how these plans are spreading, and they go hand in hand, the climate action plans with the community choice energy, because they do different things, but they really need each other. And for the climate action plans, they set up measurable goals in order to come into compliance by 2030 with SB 32. And let's see. Also, the community choice energy provides local jobs and actually reduces costs for consumers considerably, and other benefits too. But I just wanted to come and kind of open a discussion, and I noticed that Seal Beach is, at least on the internet, it shows that there was $150,000 put aside for a climate action plan a couple of years ago. So I know that you've had some interest before, and so I'm interested in finding out more about that, but I just wanted to express my enthusiasm. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Are there any other oral communications? No. Can we have a city attorney's report?
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, prior to the meeting this evening, the city council met in closed session regarding the two items on the posted agenda. With regard to the conference with labor negotiator, government code section, I should say all members of the council were present. With regard to the government code 54957.6 conference with labor negotiators, the council took a report from staff and took no reportable action. With regard to the litigation matter conference with legal counsel, City of Seal Beach versus Gentner, the city council unanimously approved the terms of a settlement in that case. The settlement is contingent on approval by the other party, and pursuant to the Brown Act, as soon as that execution of the settlement agreement is received from the other party, the settlement will be made public and available on request.
Thank you. City manager's report?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. As all of you know, yesterday we had a pretty significant and amazing collaborative public safety effort that resulted in saving a man's life. And so what I'd like to do is turn my comments over to Marine Safety Chief Joe Bailey just to summarize that event for you. Chief?
Thank you, City Manager Ingram. It's been a busy week in the marine safety world. Just before I get to that rescue, I have a couple items to tell you about. So last weekend we had the rough water swim. We started swim lessons up at Muggaw Pool last week. Our first day of junior lifeguards was this morning. And so during the last week we've had 201 rescues, 3 boat rescues, and 7 major medical aids. That's where people go to the hospital. But specifically to this event Sunday around 9:15, a lap swimmer was swimming in the pool and had a heart attack. Other lap swimmers in the pool noticed as they swam by this gentleman, and they pulled him to the side where we had 2 lifeguards on duty, Alex Cargill and Hunter Outlaw. They were able to pull the victim out of the water, and they immediately assessed the victim and started CPR because he had no pulse and he wasn't breathing. As Alex Cargill performed CPR, our other pool lifeguard, Hunter Outlaw, was getting a mask and the AED. As he was grabbing the AED, in comes Seal Beach Police Department, Brian Gray, officers Brian Gray and John Ainley, and they were bringing the AED with them. So it was a great collaborative effort where they brought the AED, they helped with the CPR and putting the AED on the victim. The second the victim was shocked, he actually regained consciousness and became combative, which can oftentimes happen, not knowing where he was. At that time, a few minutes later, the OCFA paramedics show up, and we transfer care to the paramedics where they do what they do. And as the victim was headed to the hospital, he was conscious, speaking, and aware of where he was and what was happening. So ultimately, it just shows the capacity of our public safety in this town to rescue a victim in the matter of minutes and work together to affect that rescue. And we're happy that we had such a good outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. I'd just like to point out that this is how important life safety departments are to a community, and they're not called life safety for nothing. Now, Council, City Council comments. Can we start with Councilmember Sustarsik?
I have nothing tonight, thank you.
Okay. Deaton? Councilmember Deaton.
Yeah, thanks. Great teamwork, Joe. I just love that program of the Eyes on the Water anyway, and it shows how important it is that people are really paying attention. So I really appreciate the teamwork that your department, the police department, and the fire department all seamlessly performed together. And I know the man whose life was saved does, so that was great. Thank you. I also would like to ask you if you have a shark update for us.
Sure. The update, the best way to put this is over the last 3 weeks, actually, since I wrote a letter to the junior lifeguard parents, we have had 0 sharks spotted, 0 confirmed or unconfirmed sightings. And so the latest information from the shark experts at Long Beach State, they had tagged around 7 different sharks when they were all grouped together in Long Beach about 3 weeks ago. And so I recently received a PowerPoint showing where those sharks had gone. There was 2 sharks in the San Gabriel River, and we had spotted those sharks, and that data was confirmed by the Long Beach State Shark Lab. However, we think they've moved south because after they came in the San Gabriel River, one of them was shown in Dana Point. So it's a lot of fragmented information because only 7 out of the 20 or so sharks that were in Long Beach were tagged, but we had assumed that they had come over into our river because we had spotted some, and then we haven't spotted any in the last 2 to 3 weeks, and we haven't had any reports of any, and then the data showed that one of them had been down at Dana Point. So it's tentatively good news that we haven't seen any in a while, and we're really happy we haven't seen any with our junior guard program starting, and that's really the most information I have, which I know isn't much.
Well, that helps, though. Thank you. Question: are we pretty sure that they're juveniles at this point, or do we have some that are larger?
Well, all the ones that we've seen in Seal Beach in this year have been juveniles. They've been 5 to 6 feet. The ones that were spotted in Long Beach were all juveniles, 5, 6 to 7 feet. And so, you know, you'd be naive to think that we didn't have these sharks in our close to shore water. However, all of them that we've seen have been juveniles at this point. There's definitely some bigger ones out there that have been reported and cited in Dana Point and San Clemente. In fact, the shark expert Chris Lowe from Long Beach State was tagging in San Clemente, and usually when they tag, they get in the water with the shark and jab him with a shark pole, and they usually have the grad students do it. And he was down there tagging 3 weeks ago and saw a 12-footer and said, well, we're not going to get in the water with that one. So there's definitely bigger ones out there, and close to shore, we haven't seen those in North Orange County or Long Beach at all.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I have.
Kind of makes you wonder, Jaws.
I think there's a new movie out.
Yeah. Councilmember Vera-Paca?
Yeah, I want to also give a big thanks out to shout out to Chief Bailey and his lifeguards, Alex and Hunter, is that the names? I happened to be walking by there about 10 to 9 and saw the two boys walking up and getting ready for work, as I often do on a weekend, walking my dog. And then when I walked back, I saw all the commotion. I mean, it happened, seemed like it was really fast, and there was a lot of attention there. So great job. I often visit the pool because my daughters are playing volleyball in the gym. So on the free time, I kind of walk into the pool, and the lifeguards are always attentive. I have to say, there's 2 lifeguards on duty at all times, and it's good to see that they're always there. I'm not checking on them or anything. I'm just kind of checking on the people swimming and stuff like that. And it's kind of something to do while I'm there with my daughters. So great job to those 2 fellows, and I know other people do a great job too. I also attended the OC Flag Salute celebration in Irvine last weekend. It was a good, well-attended event. And I got to go to the first day of the junior guards this morning. I saw Chief Bailey there. It was a pretty big deal. If you get a chance, go down there between 9 and noon. You'll see 300-plus children in red and blue shorts, and it's pretty cool sight to see. It's kind of organized chaos, but it is organized, and if you can pick out someone you know, it's a big challenge. So good job to that. I look forward to it. My daughter was up at 7 o'clock this morning for a 9 o'clock showing, so all dressed and ready. So she's obviously enthusiastic and excited to start the program. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Moore.
I'd also like to say great job on the rescue, and it's a great teamwork. So I'd like to compliment the city also on the new electronic newsletter that's available on the website. I think that's a great way to inform the community, to let people know what's going on in the city. I'd like to encourage people that are interested in the LA Fitness development to go to the public hearing at the Planning Commission meeting tomorrow at 7 p.m. here at the City Hall, and that's all I have.
Thank you. I had occasion to go to a vector control meeting in Orange County, and I'm finding out everything that I need to know about mosquitoes and more. And I just thought I'd let you know, whoever is watching and the people in the audience, that we now have a mosquito that bites in the daytime, and it can make you ill. So we need to begin to take really proactive approach to mosquito bites. It's just getting out of hand. But, you know, they were here first. The other thing is, today was my first meeting with the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy. Some of you know that Governor Brown appointed me to this conservancy, and I found out today that it really primarily is interested in LA County and the LA River and the San Gabriel River. That's in LA County. When it gets down to Orange County, not so much. We'll see if we can encourage them to expand their horizons to what goes on down here. They know that we are the outlet for all the junk that comes down the riverbed in bad storms, and I look forward to helping them appreciate our situation. And lastly, to my friends Mary and Gary. They live a couple of blocks from me in Leisure World. And I would like to thank them very much for their helpful comments in terms of the city council meetings. And I want them to know that I appreciate them and all that they do for the community as well. And that's all I have to say about that. Our next item is council. City of Seal Beach Strategic Plan, 6-month strategic objectives update. Can we have a staff report, please?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. As the council knows, on a monthly basis, we bring to you an update on the strategic plan objectives in terms of our progress, and so we like to take a few minutes just to briefly summarize progress for you. So I'll start with our first 3-year goal on providing a quality beach and pier environment. And there's 5 objectives here. Really pleased to say 3 out of the 5 have already been completed. And so I'm going to turn it over to our Public Works Director, Steve Miter, and he'll just briefly update you, as well as an update on the Tidelands lease agreement for the beach. And Mayor Massa-Lavit and Councilmember Deaton, since both of you were at that meeting last month, this is an opportunity for you, if you'd like to add a few comments to staff's comments, we'd welcome that as well. So, Steve, I'll turn it over to you just for some brief comments.
Thank you, City Manager Ingram. Honorable Mayor, members of the council. On this first objective, our goal was to essentially retain a contractor to update our facility master plan back and update the cost associated with the facilities identified. This has been accomplished, and what we were able to do is we were able to do this with a department head PO. We were able to accomplish this, and this is now done. And then I will go ahead and skip down to number 8. And let's see, this.
Excuse me, Steve, can we back up? I think we're on the first one, which is the beer. Wishful thinking. The quality beach and pier environment, which is the first, the goal.
On the wrong
So there's
page.
only 5 objectives on that one.
I apologize, I'm on the wrong page. Okay. We were on target, and this particular item we have already submitted, and staff has submitted an application, and we are awaiting Coastal Commission and its response.
How long have they had it?
We submitted 2 weeks ago.
And then on the second objective, the restriping of the 8th and 10th Street beach lots has been completed. The third item on the CEQA documentation for the water infrastructure and pier improvements is done. As you know, that was submitted to you at the council meeting on May 22nd. The fourth objective will update you at the next council meeting on July 10th. And then, Steve, just any comments you have. I know our staff's working with very closely with State Lands Commission on the renewal of our Tidelands lease agreement. And as I mentioned, both 2 council members may want to comment on that meeting as well.
We had a successful meeting. They came down, and we spent a half a day with them. We were able to provide the detailed information they were requesting. And we are currently putting a reply back together again. And that is the update. I believe we're on target. Again, this was a very successful meeting according to them, and we'll have it. We'll meet our target date to have it resubmitted by fall. So.
Did you want to make a comment?
I think the only comment is that we were well prepared for the meeting. I know staff did a lot of last-minute work for us. Thank you, Crystal and Steve, for all the work that you put into that. I think we made strong arguments on why we should not be paying for the lease. I think they heard our message. I think that our legal team did a great job there. Quinn Barrow covered us that night and that day, and he really had a lot of input into it, and he will be helping with the document. Is that correct, Steve?
That is correct.
Okay, because he had a lot of input and ideas on that. So we're moving forward, and I look forward to us hopefully not having to pay them a lease on that beach.
Yes.
Great, so that concludes our comments on the first goal. The second goal is on achieving short-term and long-term fiscal sustainability. There's 6 objectives under that particular goal. I'd highlight the first objective has already been completed. The balance of those are already on target for completion by the date highlighted in the first column. And so what I'd like to do is ask Finance Director Vicki Beatley to talk briefly about objective number 3 on the oil consultant, as well as objective number 6 on the city grant team, an application for a couple of grants. Vicki?
Thank you, City Manager Ingram and Mayor and members of the council. Regarding the oil consultant, we do have 2 proposals, and because of the timing of budget and all of the efforts that we've been going through the last couple of weeks, I will tell you that it's planned right now to bring the item to council for consideration on at the August 14th meeting, I believe it is, rather than the July 10th meeting. But the proposals are in, we're evaluating them. A reminder also that that money is not included in the budget, so when the item comes to council for consideration, it will also come with a budget amendment. We didn't have any notion to know whether or not we'd be moving forward and wanted council to make that decision. With regard to the grants, so the team has actually applied for 4 grants at this point in time. The police department has added the 2 newest ones. One is the ABC grant that is used for enforcement. I won't give away any details, but so I'll stop there, used for enforcement, but we know what ABC stands for. And then the other one is actually a more significant grant, and in discussions, and actually it was brought to us by Councilmember Moore, it was for what's called a COPS grant. And that is a federally funded grant that's administered through the state of California, and the police department has completed that application, and we have actually asked for funding for 2 officers. So now we're just in sort of the wait and see mode about whether or not we'll get that funding. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, so moving on to the third goal, which is improving and maintaining our infrastructure and facilities, as you can see. So these are the 8 that Steve was briefly talking about earlier. All 8 of them on target for completion by the date that's identified, and just would like, if we could, Steve Bowles just to come up, and on objective number 7 about implementing the comprehensive parking management plan, just for a brief update on that item. Steve?
Good evening, City Manager, council members, staff, and people here in the council chambers this evening. Just want to give you a quick update on our parking our parking program. Tomorrow we start taking receipt of some new meters that we're going to be bringing in. We're doing a pilot program this summer of different types of parking meters that'll be used in the beach parking lots and on the off-street parking lots off of Main Street. So currently we have the traditional old school parking meters in our parking lots that they call single space, which are just the ones that are right in front. We're going to be integrating some single space meters there with credit card technology, so everything is going to be updated there. And we're also looking at a multi-space meters where it's a pay station in another one of our off-street Main Street lots. So we're going to be doing a pilot program this summer of 3 different vendors to compare and contrast each one, see what's better for our community, as well as what's best for our staff, our enforcement staff. They're all very similar in technology, but we're looking to find out really what's the best one that works for us, and taking a little bit more extensive approach to figuring out what's the best product for our community. We also are implementing some technology here in the next couple of weeks. Our parking staff, we write parking tickets. Traditionally, they write down your information. We're integrating into some new technology. We're starting to be using a Samsung Galaxy phone
It's kind of a larger phone that they'll be using. They can actually touch everything. It's all integrated to our new parking database that we've been creating over the last year. It'll be able to pull in data and print citations more efficiently, more effectively. And they'll be taking, for instance, if you have somebody that gets a parking ticket for blocking a driveway or at a red in front of a fire hydrant, this technology will allow them to take the picture of the violation, as well as when they write the ticket, it timestamps it, GPSes it, and it uploads to the cloud. So if you get that ticket, you can go online to pay it. You can see the pictures of your car as it is sitting in violation. So, we hope to decrease the number of not necessarily complaints, because the complaints won't stop about parking, but just the disputes, because it'll at least provide people the information by what our parking folks saw when they issued the citation. And of course, we are looking at a longer-term plan where we've identified a consultant that who will help us with a larger plan of looking at our zones, our times, restraints that are around Old Town, specifically Old Town, which is where most of our parking issues are, but looking at our signage. Currently, I think I've said before, if you were to plug in a hybrid car down on Main Street, the lot says for hybrid parking only, but it doesn't say you have to be charging. It doesn't even say you have to pay the parking fee. So people will pull their hybrid cars in there and just leave it there. They don't even charge. So we're doing an analysis of all of our signage to get everything tightened up that way. And then we do look forward over the next couple months to integrating a public forum where people can come and voice their concerns over their parking issues, or praise for the parking, what we're doing, or praise for our parking enforcement officers, which we don't hear very much of. But we have a really good staff, and we really want to bring the next level of customer service to the parking side of our community.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Deaton?
Yes, Steve, specifically, though, we're supposed to have a public meeting that addresses parking in Old Town and unifying parking requirements in Old Town. And I think that's when I know that my residents have been waiting a very long time for that meeting. When do you see that meeting occurring?
I will be meeting with our consultant tomorrow to discuss, because I would like them to be present as well, their team, because they work throughout the state with beach communities and their parking needs and parking issues. So we'll be I'll be working with them tomorrow, and we'll be securing a date, and then we'll be working with your office to be able to find the best time and get that handled the next 60 days.
My office?
Where
is that? If you find it, would you call me?
I will. I was going to say, I don't have anything creative around the top of my head. I will call you.
Thank you, Steve.
And we'll figure it out.
Thank you, that's great.
Sabatini or something.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I'll tell you where it is. It's in our dining room.
Right, fair enough.
Great, thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Our next goal on attracting, developing, compensating, and retaining quality staff, we've got 4 objectives there. I'm just going to talk briefly about the first 2, which involve, the first one is our class and comp study. As you know, this has been ongoing. We're actually revising the target date on that one to our council meeting on August 14th, given our consultants' availability, so we will push that one out. And then the second one on, as all of you know, labor negotiations with the POA, PMA, and the Marine Safety Management Association is ongoing. So based on that, we will be revising that in terms of status, and the date of August 14th. Obviously, that's ongoing. So that I'll highlight those just for those, and then the other 2 objectives 3 and 4 are on target for completion by the dates noted. And then finally, on enhancing public safety, we have 4 objectives under there, all of which are on target for completion by the dates. I'd like to call up Commander Steve Bowles just to talk briefly about item 1 on animal control services analysis. Steve?
Thank you. This will be very brief. The analysis has been completed between an examination of our current animal services contract with Long Beach, the 20-hour option that we currently utilize, We also did analysis of the full-time contracted animal control officer with the City of Long Beach, as well as the reestablishing Seal Beach's own animal control bureau. The report has been completed. It's currently under review by city staff for an audit and final corrections, and will be brought to you in the August meeting. It would be brought to you in July, and I would tell you this honestly, but since I will be presenting it, I'm on vacation with my family, and we only have one council meeting in July, so I'll be here in August with you. Sorry.
Gee, you mean you're not staying home?
Yeah, sorry. But it is complete.
I can deny that if you'd like.
Unless it's canceled by my chief of police, which may have just happened. So.
Great, thank you, Steve. So council, as you'll note, we're about halfway through the 6-month period on our strategic plan and the objectives that you've all highlighted for 6 months, and I really want to thank and commend tremendous effort on our staff. As all of you know, this is above and beyond our normal daily responsibilities, and the effort that they've made to get us to this point is commendable. So thank you for that. And that's all I have on this item.
I think I speak for the council in thanking the staff for doing this work. I know how hard you all work and how much time you put in and how many issues you have on your plate. Thank you very much for doing this also.
Could I ask for one other report, perhaps, or maybe there's another place you want to put it, but item number 2, Jill, on the enhanced public safety. We'll be talking about that under the budget presentation.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was very informative. Council item B, ordinance amending chapter 3.20, purchasing system. Can we have staff report?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. So I'm going to turn this item over to our city clerk, Robin Roberts. And as you noted in the staff report and hopefully on your strategic plan update, this item is one of the objectives for completion during this 6-month period. So I want to turn it over to Robin.
Thank you, City Manager Ingram, Mayor, and City Council members. Tonight I have a brief PowerPoint presentation to provide you to supplement the information that was provided in the staff report. The staff report included a summary, background, and analysis. It included Attachment A, which is Proposed Ordinance 1667. It included Attachment B, which was a legislative draft of 3.20. It included charter reference. Whenever the charter was referenced, I included the full sections. And then it also included Attachment D that relates to our contract administration process. So as noted by City Manager Ingram, this is one of the strategic objectives. This will satisfy the request for staff to bring back an item regarding purchasing and contract administration. I first just want to provide you an overview of all of the different parts that have to do with the city's contracting or procurement information. As many of you are aware, we have both charter sections and municipal code and resolutions. So starting with charter section Article 4, which is elective office, we have 420, and I'll show you that. We have that resolution or that section next. We have charter section 10 that has to do with requiring a purchasing system, which is 1006. We also have Article 10, Charter Section 1010, that has to do with the public works contracting process. Then we have Seal Beach Municipal Code 3.20, which relates to purchasing systems. Currently, we have Resolution 6384 initiated, which initiates the authorization for the city manager to bind under certain circumstances. It has a threshold, and that is tied in now to Resolution 6405, which was last updated in 2013. That's done through the E&R process through Charter Section 1010, which you will know is on the agenda later on this evening. And I just want to say also that these regulations are just some of the guidelines that you'll find within our policy, within our municipal code and charter. This is in addition to the other fiscal documents that guide procurement, such as the appropriation limits that you're setting forth tonight, the CIP, and of course the budget documents. So this is just to highlight for the council and for the public what we previously discussed regarding Charter Section 420. This relates, this just indicates that per the charter, the city council can set a threshold or authorizing authority for the city manager when making purchases. We then have Charter Section 1010, and this again is highlighting for us that in our charter, the city council has determined the provision that they would like to be used and analyzed when setting threshold limits for public works contracting. They're using what's called the ENR, which is basically the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index, which is a standard index, and it is still relevant, so it makes sense for us to use this process. It does ask for the city engineer to bring this forth to the city council every year, and that is a public hearing item discussed tonight. And here's just a look again at the two resolutions, just highlighting that the last, with regards to Charter Section 420, the last resolution, 6384, was approved by council on June 24, 2013, and it establishes that the city manager's acquisition authority is pursuant to the process that's followed under Charter 1010. And I know these are a lot of languages, so I just want different code sections. So I just want to give you an overview of all the different things that staff took into consideration when providing the best solution. We next have the resolution 6405, approved August 26, 2013, relates to Charter Section 1010. And the last time that cost index was established, the threshold or authority was $28,797. I also wanted to let you know that Director Beatley did provide me with some information from the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers. They last did a survey regarding the city manager's purchasing authority from a study in August 2016. That had ranges from all cities across California, from 5,000 being the lowest purchasing authority to 176,000 being the highest, and the average was 43,000. So I know sometimes the council would like to see what other cities are doing, so I'm just kind of bringing you that information that staff has reviewed as well. I also wanted to highlight that while the city of Seal Beach has in its charter that we're using what we're referring to as the ENR cost index, something that other cities have done is about 1,000 agencies throughout the state of California have opted into, and I have my acronym here, I shoot myself in the foot for not writing it all down, but basically through the Secretary of State's office, there's what's called the California Contractors Contracting Act. It's the CUCCAA, so you can see that's a long acronym. But basically, it's when dealing with public works construction, they have a commission that watches the thresholds, they review the process, and a city can opt into this process. By opting into the process, you have to meet several standards, and you become part of the commission when they're reviewing to make sure everybody's following the processes appropriately. And within that, again, I noted there's 1,000 agencies as of 2017, and that current threshold for informal bids is 175,000. That information is all available on the Secretary of State's website if anybody wanted to review that process. So when trying to provide you comparisons from other cities, that's something that seems relevant to this conversation, this item. The next section, just to briefly discuss, is of course what we've kind of looked at it more thoroughly, and that is Municipal Code Section 3.20, which is a purchasing system. And for clarification, just on some of the conversation and the emails regarding concerns of this section, making any changes to Chapter 3.25, which is actually titled Civil Defense and Disaster. And this is a separate section of the code. This section of the code is there to provide an overall codification of how we respond to disaster situations. So it establishes the council, it establishes authority. It does briefly discuss allowances for purchases. But as I move through the purchasing ordinance a little bit more, we'll highlight that it does not conflict with this, and the changes that were made to this section were to provide greater transparency. So I'll highlight that in just a moment. So here's a summary of the changes to the purchasing ordinance. The formal bidding threshold would now be aligned with the established annual cost index, or ENR, pursuant to Charter Section 1010. The informal bidding thresholds would change from 1,000 to 3,000, and the informal bidding threshold requirement that's in the information does not change, and that basically is the requirements of getting a price quote from a single vendor. That's what's considered a low tier. A middle tier states that soliciting 3 verbal bids, and that would change from 5,000 to 10,000. And just as a note, there is an actual internal control on that system that the finance department has, where all the information is documented on a form so that we know what the verbal bids were and who that came from. And then the high tier requires soliciting 3 written bids. This is also captured on an internal control form. And Exhibit B to the staff report shows the legislative changes. The information also, in making this more comprehensive, there were items added. We have unauthorized purchases, subdivisions that are prohibited, conflict of interest, gift and rebates, surplus property, harmless error and omission, and then comprehensive language regarding encumbrances and purchases exempt from bidding. At this time, when we're talking about purchases exempt from bidding, where it aligns with the emergency information that was presented earlier during oral communications, I just wanted to let you know that the existing code did have a section in 3.20 that said purchases made during an emergency, that purchases during emergency can be made from the nearest available source or supply. And we have added language to delineate that this is when an emergency is declared, or that there's an authorized declaration of emergency. That would be pursuant to 3.25. We also did add Section B that provides for a process when there is emergency purposes. The main purpose of this by staff was to provide, the second part of the paragraph, or Section B, says, a full report of the circumstances of the emergency purchase shall be made by the purchasing officer to the City Council at its next regular meeting, and shall be entered in the minutes of the City Council, and shall be open to for public inspection. So based on some of the last emergency events that happened and some of the questions that came out, staff tried to take this opportunity to optimize our current ordinance and add language that would be transparent to the public and to the City Council on how we do that. By design, we don't have a specific trigger date, because one thing that staff has learned through the emergencies is that it is a fluid process. Every emergency has a different set of circumstances. We just want the City Council and the public to know that it's our intent to make sure everybody's aware of the different circumstances and try to bring back to what the emergencies' costs and procurements were. So,
And Robin, if I can just interject one point there. There was a comment made about the language in the first sentence of B about purchases made in preparation for an anticipated emergency, and opinion that was already covered in the 3.25 language giving the city manager authority to make certain purchases in the event of a local emergency. Some of you who have been with us for a couple of years will recall that in preparation for a rain event a couple of years ago, a member of the council and others argued that existing language in the emergency portion of the code did not give the city manager authority to prepare for an emergency. And in fact, that's why we put language here, because there was some controversy about whether or not that language that exists in the code already gives the manager the authority to prepare for an emergency. A council member and members of the public said that in fact that it didn't apply to that. I interpreted it otherwise, but the reason for putting this language in here in this section is to make it very clear that the manager has the authority to prepare for an anticipated emergency under the circumstances that are set out in this section.
Thank you. So to wrap this section up in this slide, I also wanted to let you know that another survey was completed from the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers during a listserv of this month, and it had to do with purchasing limits. So all the information that we're bringing you talks about contracting authority, thresholds, bidding requirements, but it also just talks about general purchasing thresholds and processes. So when speaking of purchasing limits and tiers, in the survey that was done across California cities this year, the cities participating ranged again from 5,000 being the lowest to 125,000 being the top in this survey. And so that's an average of 33,000, just to bring you some general information on that. And also in this section, when we're reviewing section 3.20, we did receive an email communication from Robert Goldberg regarding a section in this area. It's before you tonight that in working with the city attorney and the finance director that we've added language to address the concerns, and that would be in section 3.20.030. We've added item N, and that item N reads, when it is the city's advantage to combine its purchases with those of another government entity in order to affect economies by bidding combined requirements, and the governmental entity actually soliciting the bids employs a bidding procedure adequate to ensure competition among responsible bidders. So this is fairly standard language across cities that you'll see in municipal ordinance to help with what's also discussed as a piggyback of contracts for governmental agencies. So we did add this in. So in approving this item tonight, it's our recommendation that you add as recommended changes that was distributed this evening. So what we have worked really hard to provide, and I know, given that there's a lot of information out there, we've worked to provide you a clean, clear, and consistent purchasing process through optimizing our municipal code language. So this would mean that we would have one annual resolution for council consideration regarding bidding thresholds. The one threshold would be citywide for bidding, contracting, and procurements. The language that has been added is comprehensive and clarifying to those items that had not been either included in the past or just language to help make it a little more clear. What it doesn't do, Ordinance 1667, when approved and codified, does not require that the City Council make a change to the threshold annually. It just means that staff is to present that information, and if you do make a change, it's used for all of those three purposes: bidding, contracting, and procurement. So one threshold. Ordinance 1667 optimizes existing required procedures pursuant to the charter and the municipal code sections and again, will be reviewed annually. I'll move on to contract administration, just real briefly. I have their teamwork. I just want to let you know that we've been working together as a team to bring about contract administration that will help ensure compliancy to all of the previous charter sections and municipal codes discussed. I say teamwork because I know I've been asking and recommending certain changes here and there, and change is not always easy. And I appreciate our staff and team and the city manager for taking this information seriously and working on it as a team. So contract administration ensures compliance with established regulations, mitigates risk, assists in centralized contract administration. So this is currently our process, and you'll note that I did provide the contract submittal form if you want to reference attachment D to item B. So the contract submittal form is now done manually, potentially done electronically in the future. It's completed by the staff, and then on the top section of the form, you'll see that staff is required to put the pertinent information, along as having the department head sign the form, attach all required documents, and then submit it to the city clerk. The city clerk's office at this point, we log the information in, kind of do an overview of the information before going to finance. The importance of logging it in is questions will come up if we have a contract on a certain item. For instance, from the finance department, if they've had a request for a purchase order. If it's not already in Laserfish, then we have an area that our staff can let somebody know, yes, we do have something, it's not fully executed, and it's in process. So then it goes to the finance department, and the finance director makes sure and verifies that the funding source is there, that it is an approved appropriation, if there's a purchasing order requirement, that it's been met, any federal forms such as a W-9 is turned in, and we also establish required business licenses at this point. So if any of these items are not complete, the finance department works directly with staff to make sure they gain compliancy in all areas. It then comes back to the city clerk's office, and as city clerk, I verify that the insurance documents meet the requirements that are within the contract itself. I establish a signature authority by writing down the appropriate code citation or resolution or charter section. I make sure that the city attorney has reviewed and approved as to form the agreement, and that's for all contracts. So not all contracts were coming through the city clerk's office, and now even if it's a contract that's signed by a director, this process is across the board so that we'll have a central repository. And the next stop is at the city manager's office. So all of the information, the city manager can see what staff has done to make sure everything is compliant. If it's a document for her to sign, the city manager would sign it at that point, or have any questions that she may want to ask staff directly before returning it to the city clerk's office. And at that point, when it goes back to the city clerk's office, we go ahead and scan it into Laserfish, and we'll provide it to the vendor. And this is a full review, so this is a full comprehensive review of all agreements to make sure that there's full compliancy. It has different points of assurances, and because the contract is a public document, we're looking to, with this centralized system, once we know we have everything in Laserfish, we're looking to put that information on a web view so that the public has access to all contracts. We think this will also facilitate the process that we have now of quarterly contracts, and that's just the city manager. There's still other contracts that may be done by a director. So we feel like this would be a better way of us spending our time making sure everything is in one central repository and available to the public. There's no additional cost to doing that. We're already scanning things into Laserfish. But not having been here for the amount of time where all those records are populated, I don't know. I would have to go through each and every contract to review it to see if there's any redactions or documents that should not be contained in there. So we're looking at doing this day forward. So if you have any thoughts on that, I think staff would appreciate your feedback. I know. So, almost done. Additional internal controls, so just to make sure you know that the finance department has additional internal controls. Purchase order approval process, purchase order supplemental form, department head approval for every new vendor, and verification that is required on all contracts or purchase orders on file. So it's important to note that the finance department will not release any payments until the processes mentioned are fully complete. Further, with the adoption of 1667 and in partnership with the finance department, we plan on providing training to staff, and that training will include these processes, but it'll also include some of the important items that were added to our purchasing ordinance regarding conflict of interest and the gifts and rebate section. So we feel that will be great training for staff. And in conclusion, staff's recommendation is that the City Council approve for introduction ordinance 1667 revising Chapter 3.20 to update and restate the city's comprehensive purchasing requirements. If approved, the ordinance will return to the consent calendar on July 10th City Council meeting and will be codified 30 days later. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Are there any questions of staff? That's pretty comprehensive.
Great job. Thank you.
Councilmember Sistarsik. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate the contracts being in a central cache. I wanted to ask if there's a way that, as they all come in one place and they come back, is there a way that we can get be able to sort for expiration dates, that sort of thing, to try to help that we get contracts to us before they expire?
Yes, I've actually been working on a program. I did have an intern that was working in the finance department go through our contracts cabinet and update or add a expiration date if it wasn't. I still have to review that process to make sure that all the information is verified, but we have started doing that. But just given the amount of work that's going on in the city clerk's office, that isn't fully achieved. Moving forward, we are adding that to the template process. And when it's added to the template or metadata within the Laserfish program, you can provide a report and you can separate it out. My hope is that on a monthly basis, I will bring that report to our executive team meetings and just let the department heads, the directors know what contracts are up to expire so they could go ahead and look at reestablishing them or not.
Okay, thank you. I did have concerns about the, what do they call it, the construction cost index. I know they said that's not required, but some of the escalators that were in here were kind of high, and so I'm told that it was just a number of years ago that we had like about a $5,000 limit that came to council. So I know it's been 28 for a while, but they had from 13 to 17, it went up 11%, and it was going up 12% or something over a few years. So I was just concerned about an automatic, increase kind of getting out of hand. So I'm happy to see that the recommendation would come to council so that council could decide on that.
Councilmember Sistarsik, if I could just briefly comment on that. Sure. I think the increases that you've seen in the previous staff reports is because the item wasn't being presented to council annually. So then you're looking at something that's 4 to 5 years out, and so there's that large jump, and it looks like a significant number, but if you looked on an annual basis, that number probably is less scary looking.
Let me see if I have another one. Let's see. Okay, I guess that's it for right now. Tom.
Councilmember Moore?
Yeah, on the 3.20.030, on the purchases exempt from bidding requirements, can you explain the D, and is that different than our existing?
So there is language, let me get to that page real quick. So the questions that have occurred regarding item D from the exemption, which is professional services, related to the purchase of professional services. The existing language states that the exemption applies without limitation to purchases of architectural services, bond services, election services, engineering services, insurance services, legal services, public relations services, real estate services, and solid waste disposal services. So the current code does list exemptions for this process, and as stated in our comments and council questions, this having professional services is common throughout cities in the municipal code. What was done here, the city attorney actually provided more comprehensive language to really highlight the different services that may be rendered, so that for public knowledge, so you can see a variety of services. There's no change. These services would still be exempt from the bidding requirement.
Okay.
Under the existing code, we've just elaborated or provided more comprehensive language so you can get a full view of all of the different services. And these are basically services where the quality and the education and the knowledge is more important to the city to function in the whatever process they're looking than the price.
Okay. And then, yeah, what Shelley was saying about the contract, have we looked at contract management software where you can keep track of your contracts? I'm not sure what the regulations are, but you can digitally sign things.
Yeah, I have briefly reviewed some of the contract softwares. I'm routinely called from salesmen or salespeople on those different software solutions for contract administration. However, what we're working on right now, we're working on some more fundamental processes, and I feel like what we have in Laserfish and some of the upgrades that may occur in Laserfish will allow workflow and allow e-forms, so I think we're better off to leverage our existing system and just make full use of it, which will help us track contracts and potentially send them through a workflow process.
And the other issue with regard to digital signatures, for example, is that under state law, the Secretary of State has to approve a system through which the digital preparation and preservation of documents will occur. And not everybody has access to the systems that the Secretary of State is approving. And so you need both sides to the contract to have that access, and right now that access is really inconsistent, so most public agencies are not yet able to do that digital exchange of documents, that digital signature process, because the use of the systems that have been approved has not yet reached a point where both sides to the contract are able to do it. And so that's certainly something that the procurement officers and finance officers are working toward, and the really big agencies are getting there faster than the smaller agencies. And the Secretary of State is trying to approve, I think, systems that everybody has access to.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you just briefly discussed the difference between the 3.25 civil defense and disaster section over the anticipated local emergency section? I mean, how does that truncate one over the other?
It does not truncate one over the other. And the city attorney may want to interject here, but the municipal code section 3.25, as I understand it, is a way to create the council and the authority to which happens when there is a disaster or an emergency situation. The purchasing system is to cover the processes and the regulations regarding purchases for citywide. So that doesn't just speak to bidding, but it also just talks to procurement. It also talks to surplus items. So when we're talking about items exempt from the bidding process and the emergency section, which again was in there originally, it's just been made more comprehensive, again with that reporting requirement, so that the city council knows that the city manager and staff will bring the item back after the emergency.
So in section 3.25, it's 7 days, and in section 3.20 would be up to 14 days, given depending on when the next council meeting is. Is that? Would that be correct?
And I think there's a reason for that, because under the 3.25, the city you have to remember that under 3.25, we're talking about proclaimed local emergencies. Something happens.
Something already happened. Right?
The city manager, either the council meets and proclaims an emergency, in which case this discussion is moot, or something happens, the city manager says, hey, the city council is not meeting, I'm going to proclaim a local emergency, and I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to buy some stuff to help with that situation. Under that chapter of the code, regardless of whether the city manager buys anything, if the city manager proclaims a local emergency, the city council has to meet within 7 days and ratify that. Okay, so that's a circumstance where something happens, we react to it. Within 7 days, the city council has to meet and ratify everything that's been done, or that emergency just goes away. So that's why there's a 7-day provision in 3.25. It's not just about purchasing, it's about the actual proclamation of the emergency itself, and the council has a state law responsibility to meet within 7 days. In the purchasing ordinance that's before you, the deadline is the next regular meeting, because there's not that 7-day urgency that is imposed on you in the case of a proclamation of a local emergency. So given the situation that occurred a couple of years ago, we heard that there was going to be the King Kong of El Niños, or Godzilla of El Niños, or whatever it was called, this huge problem. Some supplies were purchased in preparation or contracted for in preparation for that. And the question was, should those have been bid because there wasn't a specific authority in 3.25 because there hadn't been an emergency proclaimed? And so what we're trying to do here is say we don't need a proclamation of a local emergency. There's a certain authority to prepare for an emergency that hasn't happened yet. And by the next regular meeting of the city council, the city manager will come to you and report what those expenditures were, because there's no legal requirement to meet within 7 days, the way there is if an emergency has been proclaimed.
Right. And the
So it's two different situations, and that's what we're trying to do.
My point was that the reporting period would be within the next city council meeting, which would be, in most cases, 2 weeks, or give or take a few days, or depending on what time of the month it landed on. Right? Is that safe to say?
Yes. The requirement is the next regular meeting.
Right.
That doesn't mean we couldn't do it sooner if necessary, but it's the next regular meeting, and your municipal code says when each regular meeting is going to be, so it's not a sort of imaginary date out there. We know when those meetings are going to be.
I got it. And in that same section, 3.20.030B, it says regardless of the amount of the expenditure. Does that mean it can go as high as it wants, or what does that threshold there.
Um,
Am I reading that right?
I'm trying to see where you're reading it.
The first sentence, that's the longest sentence, but toward the end. Any supplies or contractual services, regardless of the amount of the expenditure. Does that mean that we can go beyond the threshold, or how does that read to you?
Are you in B?
I'm turning this on up.
B like boy or D like dog?
B like boy. It starts with purchases made in preparation for an anticipated local emergency, which requires the 1, 2.
So this item relates to what is exempt from bidding.
Right.
And therefore, there would not be a bidding requirement, but City Attorney, please let me know if I'm wrong, but under the city manager's authority, if it's not under the declaration, then we're looking at the threshold, which, for example, right now is $28,797.
I mean, it doesn't say that. I mean, I'm sure it says it in the beginning, the threshold.
Well, yeah, so that is why we added that language to the threshold when we're talking about low tier, medium tier, and high tier. So that's why we're having, our recommendation is to include that section. If you'll note, the section relates back to Charter Section 1010, so that rate that is established annually once a year, either increased or not, remain the same, is the threshold for the majority of the purchasing regulation.
And if you look at the last sentence of that section of 3.20030, the absolute last sentence of the section says, notwithstanding the exemption from bidding, the contracting requirements still apply.
Okay, as long as the threshold's there, which I see it is. And then, does it read A, B, C, D, E, F, I?
Yes, there's one letter missing, I think we realized today.
And routinely, when we go through the codification process, any kind of numbering or sequential error is taken care of. It's just a typographical error. It doesn't require any notation, and it's done when it's codified into the municipal code. It's completed.
And the clock starts when the purchase is purchased, I guess, right? When the item is purchased? Would that be correct?
Well, I think it's going to depend on the item. Some things are going to be, the clock's going to start when the order is made. Other things are going to be when a piece of equipment or something is delivered and we pay for it. I mean, it's just, you can't really put a bright line rule. But obviously the intent is to start it as early as possible and report it as early as possible.
I'm good, thank you.
Just a couple of things. What does trigger it then, Craig? If sometimes it'll be this and sometimes it'll be that, what is the trigger?
The trigger is going to be the earliest event in the process where we're bound to something. But in some cases, an employee is going to go to a hardware store and buy it. In another case, an employee is going to make a phone call and make an order, and that's going to be the triggering event. It's just.
So at any rate, what you just said is the earliest. What did you say?
The earliest event in the process where the city's committed to it.
Okay, there you go. That's the answer then. Okay, then the second thing, I wanted to continue the discussion that Shelley and Tom started on how to pick up these contracts at an earlier date so that we don't get them after they've expired or right before they're going to expire. While software is wonderful and we all love it when it works, it goes back to long before we had computers with tickler files. So what process are we going to use now to stay on top of contracts at an earlier point to be brought to council? And I think that's the...
Well, from my perspective, what I'm working towards in this process is to provide a resource for the directors and having established the expiration date, and during our executive team meeting, I would run a report through the Laserfish, because we're now inputting that data into a template or a metadata within the system, I'm allowed to run a report that will show, run it by expiration date, and bringing it in, several months in advance. Staff and the directors can review everything and let their staff know what items are expiring. So it's a beginning to put the system together, and I truly believe that once we get through some of these phases or hurdles, that staff and council will see a positive outcome of it. There is a lot of work that's going into this purchasing system and the contract administration system. I would say it is a fluid process. We're still learning things in collaboration with each other on how things will work. But as your city clerk, my intent is to make sure the metadata is in there, provide reports to staff at the executive team meeting on a monthly basis. That will give a look out to 9 months to a year in advance on when these are coming up. We do have an internal working document that is called our tentative agenda sheet, and I'm starting to track those on that sheet as well. For instance, there's a contract that expires in 2018, so I'm keeping that information there so it's relevant and fresh. When that date starts coming up, we can have that discussion at our executive team meeting. So there is work going into making sure that occurs, but it is still work in progress.
Okay, well, it sounds like that's your goal. I was thinking in a red light, yellow light, green light formula where, hey, this one's really tight, this one needs to get done, and yellow is this is coming, and green is it's done.
Yeah, I could add colored highlights to my report.
Well, I'm not trying to tell you how to do your report.
The system doesn't have that in it right now, but when we do work towards potentially migrating to the newer platform, it does have workflow, and that could potentially trigger an email within a certain date. I would have to work on what the scripting would be required, but I could certainly do scripting where it would send me even just an automated reply that this is coming up in, a 90-day or 6-month window. I think 6 months is probably best, but.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
We'll continue to work on that.
Thank you.
Another fantastic job. I don't know how you guys keep all this straight.
Can I ask?
Okay, are there any other questions?
Could I ask a couple more? Just kind of going off of Councilman Vera Papa's, if it isn't really changing the city manager's authority, maybe it's the difference between the 7 days and the next council meeting. It feels a little bit kind of stretched. So I guess I would maybe like reassurance that I wouldn't want it to be like a month, like in the summertime we have our meetings every month before I knew that something was happening. So as long as, we're informed or whatever, I guess that's what I want to know. If something is happening, to just be, it seems like a long time when it's stretched out like this. There was also one section where it said that the city manager, what is this? This is 320.030D on the back side, and it said proposals should be submitted whenever practical from at least 3 firms. That just seemed a little, I know sometimes you can't do that, but whenever practical sounded a little bit big to me. And on 3.20.30, purchases being exempt from bidding requirements, purchases can be obtained from one vendor in such cases that, they give some licensing fitness for a particular use. It was just, that also seemed a little vague, sometimes a little subjective, so those were
couple places where I.
We should
also
point out
had-
that that's in the existing code. I mean, that's
also in the existing code. Okay.
That's in our existing code and a pretty common.
It's common language.
And an example would be often specific types of playground equipment is only available from one licensed vendor.
Okay.
And so if you want that playground equipment, you have to buy it from a vendor. That's a pretty common, or a type of police car, things like that are brand specific.
Okay.
Is the type of thing we're talking about there, but it is in the existing code.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, are we ready to entertain a motion?
I'd like to move it, please. How do you want it worded, Craig?
Introduce, read by title only, waive for the reading of ordinance number 1667.
Okay, and no changes, right?
Right.
Okay.
With the addition of the language that's before you on the dais.
And
for
N,
that
correct?
N, yes.
N is in Nancy.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, please vote. Okay, 5-0.
Ordinance number 1667, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Seal Beach amending Chapter 3.20 of Title III of the Code of the City of Seal Beach to update and restate the city's comprehensive purchasing requirements.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Do we have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, please vote. Okay, 5-0. Public hearing. Approve a resolution adjusting the bidding thresholds for public works contracts.
Mayor, excuse me. Can we take a 5-minute break?
Go right ahead.
Great. Thank you.
We'll be back at 9:05.
Might never be cross, so try to be boss, but they wouldn't do. For nobody else gave me a thrill. With all of your faults, I love you still. It had to be you, one for you. It had to be you. It had to be you, one for you. It had to be you.
That is brand new from Matt Barber on KJazz 88.1. It had to be you. Romancing Nashville, the name of that CD. John Jenkins and Kenny Burrell just before that, From This Moment On. If you get your hands on that CD, you have some classic Kenny Burrell. Got into that set of three, Alfie, handpicked the name of the CD from Earl Clue as we get ready for another young man on the guitar, Wes Montgomery on KJazz 88.1.
This is listener-supported public radio at 88.1. KKJZ Long Beach, Los Angeles, and KKJZ HD1 Long Beach, a service of California State University, Long Beach. Worldwide at jazzandblues.org.
As we ease into another hour of great music, I want to bring you Young Hope Unlimited, as well as brand new from Elijah Rock, Pete Escovedo, Dave Brubeck Quartet. But let's kick it off with Dizzy Gillespie, hanging out on the sunny side of the street on KJazz 88.1.
the shade with my blues on parade. Well, I'm not afraid, 'cause the rovers, they're over, fast over if I never have a cent. I'll be rich as Rockefeller with gold dust at my feet on the sunny, yes, on the sunny, well, on the sunny side of the street.
That's Young Hope Unlimited, Light My Fire from the definitive Young Hope. Got into that set of three, Dizzy Gillespie, the bebop master himself, On the Sunny Side of the Street. That is from the best of Odyssey, 1945 to 1952, the early bebop years, as we get ready for Elijah Rock on KJazz 88.1.
Fascinating rhythm, you got me on the go. Fascinating rhythm, I'm on the quiver. What a mess you're making, the neighbors want to know why I'm always shaking just like a flipper. Each morning I get up with the sun to find that night no work has been done. I know that once it didn't matter, now you're doing wrong when you start to matter. I'm so unhappy. Want to take a day off, decide to run along, summer fall way off and make a snappy. Oh, how I long to be the man I used to be. Fascinating rhythm, stop picking on me. rhythm, you got me on the go. Fascinating rhythm, I'm all a quiver. What a mess I'm making, the neighbors want to know why I'm always shaking like a feather. Each morning I get up with the sun, start a hopping, never stopping, to find at night no work has been done. I know that once it didn't matter, but I ain't doing wrong when you start to patter. I'm so unhappy. Once you take a day off, the Saturday on a long summer, fall away off and make it snappy. Oh, how I long to be that man I used to be. Fascinating rhythm, stop digging. Fascinating rhythm, stop digging. Fascinating rhythm, stop picking on me.
Welcome back. Next item on the agenda, where did we leave off? Public hearing, approve a resolution adjusting the budget. We already did that. No? We didn't. Why not?
We started to.
Approve a resolution adjusting the bidding thresholds for public works contracts. This is a public hearing. Can we have a staff report, please?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I'll turn this item over to Michael Ho, our Deputy Public Works Director. Michael?
Thank you, City Manager Ingram. Tonight's agenda item G is to consider a resolution adjusting the bidding threshold for the public works contracts. Earlier this evening, the city clerk mentioned that the last bidding threshold amount was adjusted back in 2013 with an amount of $28,797. Fast forward to today, the June 2017 CCI is increased to 12%. So this raised the bidding threshold from $28,797 to $32,267. By adjusting the bidding threshold, this will effectively optimize the efficiency and continue to conduct normal business. It is recommended the City Council hold a public hearing, and after considering all testimony and evidence presented, adopt resolution number 6744, confirming the adjustment of the bidding threshold on public works contracts to $32,267 pursuant to City Charter, Section 1010. This concludes my report, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Vera Papa.
Do you know what the thresholds are compared to other Orange County cities? Our threshold is, like roughly some of the other adjacent cities, perhaps?
I think, I believe City Clerk had some data that provided some local surveys.
So when we were reviewing the information, again, for Public Works construction contracts, I did not find that there are any surrounding cities that made use of the ENR process. We didn't do a thorough review of that. However, we did note that most of the surrounding cities do use the state cost accounting program for public works constructions. That threshold is 175 by state. It doesn't necessarily mean that all cities have used the 175 amount, but just opted into the program itself.
But you don't have the figure or the amount for the adjacent cities?
For just for public work construction, no. I would just say that it would follow the process through the state program. We did review city manager authority, which generally the city manager's authority is going to be the top authority, and I don't believe you'd normally have the Public Works Construction Authority being above the city manager authority.
Does it waive the competitive bidding process?
No, this process does not waive the competitive bidding process, no.
So everything else would, above this would go to the city council?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Moore? No. I can hear the wheels turning here.
I just have my comment that with such a tight budget, I think that leaving it at the current rate is fine.
Okay. Any other comments? Then would someone like to make
Public hearing.
I'm going to make a comment.
Mayor, we need to conduct the public hearing before council members comment.
Okay. We'll open the public hearing. Anyone in the audience like to speak? Okay. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. And my comment is that we have a system that operates pretty well. And having that threshold be adjusted annually or however long we want to make it seems to be working well. I am not in favor of changing the recommendation for this item, and I think the Public Works Director needs the authority to approve contracts that are above the current threshold because prices are going up. We all know that when we've been dealing with contract services, and not professional contract, but if we go out to a contractor, that everything costs more. And I think the Public Works Director ought to have the authority to work within the guidelines established. And I don't find that the increase is detrimental to anyone or anything that the city does. Okay, that's my comment.
The only comment I would like to make is, Tom, I agree with you, the budget is really, really tight. And we need to live within the budget. And I believe that our Public Works Director has every intentions of living within the budget. And if he needs to go to $32,000 to do something and get it done, that's what keeps the wheels at City Hall moving. And if he has to wait 2 weeks to come and get authority to do something, it stops the wheels. So I think that contract authority, the purpose of it is to allow city government to be more efficient. It's always a balance between checks and balances and getting the machine moving. So I think in this case, we're talking, what, $4,000 to $5,000 more with the increase in CPI and in the increase of labor and increase in everything. I think that going up to $32,267 is entirely reasonable, and I agree that it should be an annual adjustment because life is an annual adjustment, and therefore I'm completely comfortable doing that, knowing that our staff knows how tight this budget is.
Any other comments?
Just a question, this just raises it to 32. It doesn't set up an automatic increase. It just will come back to us at a later time. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Can we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, please vote. 1 no, 4 yes. And item H on the agenda, adopt the operating budget and 5-year capital improvement program, the CIP. Approve the CIP budget for fiscal year 2017 and 18. Set the appropriations limit for fiscal year 2017-18 and authorize appropriations by fund. Can we have a staff report?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I'll turn this item over to our Finance Director and City Treasurer, Vicki Beatley.
Thank you, City Manager, Mayor, members of the Council. I have a brief presentation. The first few slides are just reminder for information only. The first slide is just highlighting the mission statement that we've been following now for a couple of years. The second slide is reminding us all of the core values and guiding principles that the Council adopted this year at the strategic planning session. The third slide is a reminder of the City Council goals, and the only one I will highlight here is that this year the City Council actually added enhanced public safety as a 5th goal. The next slide is just a refresher on the projected revenues for the general fund. Those revenues remain unchanged. They're projected at $30,195,900. The next slide is also a refresher on the general fund proposed expenditures. They too remain unchanged at $30,184,900. And also just to remind us all that this number does not include the CIP. The next slide is the difference between those two numbers, a surplus which remains unchanged at $11,000. And again, I'll highlight that there's been no changes. There's been some revised pages that have come through, but the revised pages that have come through are primarily cosmetic, so there's been no change to any of the numbers per se in the budget that is before you this evening for adoption. And then the last thing I'd like to remind us all and perhaps open a discussion about is the one item that Council asked us to take a little deeper dive into from the budget workshop, and that was consideration of potentially adding 2 additional police officers. At the beginning of the meeting, we went over the strategic plan goals, and one of those goals was to add 2 officers. So this is in conjunction with that goal and to open up discussion for the Council to perhaps make that consideration. I will say that what we would like to do or how we'd like to pursue this evening is to have the Council, assuming the public hearing goes well and there's no changes that come up, adopt the budget as presented and ask that you provide direction to staff for perhaps coming back with the ultimate solution. But with regard to the 2 police officers, excuse me, and Chief Miller can jump in during this conversation also at any time. What he and I have worked on over the last several weeks is a funding mechanism for the first year only. So I want to highlight that because this is just something that we're looking at in the immediate term. We've come up with some funding options and know full well that it is just a one-year look, but there's some ideas in the pipeline that we have for funding the 2 additional officers if the council chooses to move in that direction on a go-forward basis. And without giving a lot of details, what we're looking at is the comprehensive parking management plan. The council had increased the budget in that number to about $500,000, and we are putting a lot of different parts of the comprehensive parking management plan into place, including having a new consultant. And the new consultant looked at the prior consultant's proposal for equipment and has given us the go-ahead to eliminate about $150,000 out of that proposed budget. The primary reason that we are able to do that is because the vendors that Commander Bowles mentioned earlier in his presentation have solutions that are more cost-effective for the city to consider, and that's one reason why we're actually doing the parking pilot program in the coin lots on Main Street, so we can see what the equipment looks like, know how it operates in our environment, understand the ease of operation, and understand the enforcement that's related to that new equipment. Also, the budget workshop highlighted the fact that we moved an officer that was in the general fund back into the asset seizure fund because there's sufficient money now in that particular program to support that officer. In discussion with the chief, we have talked about identifying approximately $50,000 worth of proposed expenditures in the general fund that can be shifted to the asset seizure fund very easily. Earlier in the year, the assistant city manager brought forth to the council the cell tower contracts, and those were approved by the council. And in signing those contracts, the city actually received $90,000 in a one-time payment. We'd like to use that money for the first-year funding of those officers. And then finally, the police department, although one of the larger expenditures in the city, is really pretty well managed from a fiscal perspective. And there's history over the last several years that overall their budget has come in between 1% and 2% below what was authorized in the proposed budget. And this year in particular, we're anticipating about a $50,000 savings from the police budget itself. So all of those total about $340,000, which is surprisingly enough the estimated cost for those 2 additional police officers. And that actually concludes my presentation, and would be happy to answer any questions that the council has with regard to any of the budgets. If there's CIP questions, Director Miter is available to answer the questions. And then, of course, with regard to the police officers, Chief Miller is available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of staff? Let's start. Councilmember Sistarsik, you want to start?
I'll start. I just had a question about the $90,000 cell phone cell tower. Did I see that in the budget somewhere? And is it being used for something specific, or?
It's in the estimated actual for this current fiscal year. And no, it is not. It does not need to be used. There's no constraints. This was effectively a signing bonus to the city.
Okay, so it's not already going to something else. Okay. I did have a couple questions. Let's see. One of them was about the gas tax and the M2 money that were transfers out. I looked and saw, what is it, page 17? Not in the budget book. on page 17, in the right-hand column is estimated ending fund balance, and it, even with the, $3 million coming in, it brings the ending balance on those funds down to a very low level. So I was just concerned that the income next year might not be enough to do a project or whatever. So, and that next year we wouldn't be able to tap into this resource again. So that was a concern.
I understand, and Director Miter might be able to provide some additional insight, but one of the things that we also need to keep in mind is part of this money is committed for capital improvement projects, and if the projects aren't completed, then the money stays in the fund, and if the projects obviously come in higher, then the balance is reduced, but very often the project costs actually have been coming in lower. So understand the concern. Yes, we're drawing down the fund. We have MOU requirements that we keep throughout the years and report to OCTA. We ensure that all of those requirements are met.
Okay. And so if costs came in lower, then the money would just stay in that?
It would stay in the gas tax fund balance, yes.
Okay. One more question. It was about, let's see what project it is. ST 1508, signage improvements in Old Town. I found it. I was just flashing through it because it said parking and I was looking for signs. That one in there says it's low priority, so I wasn't sure exactly what it would be doing, and if if it wasn't something urgent, if that could wait a year. It's just information.
That's actually a great question, and the money that was set aside for signs, the Public Works Department actually does a tremendous job. In fact, just today, one of the Public Works field maintenance crews was out changing street signs out in front of the library. And so it's not for any signs in particular, but if a sign is so faded that it's not legible anymore, then with the assistance of the CSOs in parking, they make reports to Public Works about signs that are hard to read, and Public Works gets the signs printed and then goes back out and reprints the sign. Now, in conjunction with the parking management program, we also set some additional money aside because one of the connected issues is that some of the signs that we have are not properly reflective of the actual enforcement requirements. And so we were looking at having to change some of the more significant signs. For example, the beach lot has a fairly large sign that says a whole bunch of things, but we enforce for other issues, say a large motor home is taking up 2 spaces. Well, you're supposed to, per our fee schedule, you're supposed to pay for each space, but the sign doesn't say 1 space per vehicle. So it's for incidences like that where we need to add some additional signage throughout the city for various and assorted reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Deaton.
I have a few, thank you. I'd like to address the signage first of all. In Old Town, we actually give tickets to people for the way they park, and the signs have to be able to be read. If they aren't read, then we're in trouble, and we have signs that need to be replaced, number one. Number two, I think we're also looking at having a public forum that we talked about tonight, where we're trying to get all of Old Town to be unified so everyone knows which side of the street is 1 hour, which side of the street is all day, and to bring in the teen streets into 1 hour parking if the residents want that, because they have some parking issues with restaurants close to PCH and so forth. So we have a number of signage issues. I'm not quite sure why it says low priority, because it's very high priority to be in compliance with the law. So I don't know, at least that's what Chief Miller keeps telling me, that it's high priority to stay within the law. So just that on signage. Also, I want everyone to remember that I do want to get rid of the beach parking signs, because I think that will really, really help our Old Town situation if we say public parking rather than beach parking, because I feel that people come into town, they say beach parking, I'm not going there, I'm going to a restaurant. If they see public parking, they're likely to go on down and park, and that may bring us in more parking revenue and alleviate some of our parking issues. So that's another signage issue. All right, so that's on signage. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about our reserves, or the lack thereof, this year. We have just under $3 million. Is that fair to say? The 90,000 that was coming in from the cell towers will now be taken out of the just under $3 million. Is that what I'm to understand?
Yes, that would be
So
fine.
again, that's another thing that we are taking from reserves. We're talking about adding 2 police officers. I really, really, really want to add 2 police officers, but I don't want to take and pay salaries out of reserves, because then you get at the end of the year and what do? You lay them off. So I would like to approve the 2 policemen tonight, with the caveat that we don't do any hiring until we have a long-term plan, so that you come back to us and let us know how are we going to be able to afford these police officers going forward. I don't think there's any argument that we need them. We just need to know how we're going to pay for them long-term, so that we don't get a 1-year solution to a 20-year problem. Okay, so then I would also like to talk about the things that we're not talking about that we still have to pay for. We've talked about cops and how we need an ongoing revenue source in order to keep them. We've talked over and over again about oil recovery. Well, we know that we need someone to help us with oil recovery, but we don't have that in the budget. What that means is we go back into that same reserves and take out more money for that. So every time that we talk here from tonight on, every time we say, gee, we'd like to do that, that's coming out of reserves. So we have to start finding a way to put the money back. We have not only the police officers, we have the oil recovery consultant, we have the possibility of state lands. As hard as we're working to get, to be sure that we don't pay on the beach lease, we don't know. We're at the mercy of the state on that. And I meant to check today and forgot to check. Is Las Cerritas Wetlands in the budget?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. And then animal control is another thing that we've heard over and over again. The residents want more animal control service. We don't have that budgeted.
We don't have additional services. We have the current service level with the CPI
Right.
increase.
Right. So, but we know that our residents want us to increase it. So therefore, we're once again looking at the reserves. So I'd like to talk about a couple of things. I think there might be some things that we can pull out and try to beef up our reserves a tiny bit in order to be able to take them out on the other side with these things like police officers, oil recovery, possible state lands, possible more animal control. One of the things I'd like for my colleagues to consider is possibly having a new philosophy on our CIP. We can't pay for CIP out of reserves anymore. That's been a pay-as-you-go process that we have been doing for many years now, and it's no longer sustainable. If we're going into reserves to pay for an oil recovery consultant, how are we going to pave streets? So one of the things I'd like to see us do is, on our estimates on the CIP, I would like to ask us to consider putting an automatic inflation adjuster on that, so that we know that when we're looking at the CIP costs, they don't automatically jump on us when we say, oh, well, that estimate, we did that 3 or 4 years ago, that's no longer valid. So I think that might help us in our planning a little bit if we had a CIP, CIP, consumer price, CPI inflation adjuster. That's one of the things that I would like to do. I really think we need to move forward with the oil recovery consultant. I don't know, Vicki, how much you're planning on starting with, how much money that you're looking to come to ask us to do on it. We don't really know how much money is out there, so it's kind of a great unknown. But philosophically, I would like to take some of that and not just spend it. I would like it to go back into building those reserves. Because, God forbid, I mean, this is Seal Beach, what could happen, right? Fire, flood, who knows, right? So we need our reserves. They're very important. And it's been great to be able to pay as we go on CIP projects, but at this point, we need to start building up the reserves rather than draining them. The Pier Utility Project, I'm just wondering where the numbers have come from on the Pier Utility Project, and if we have any concept on whether or not some of that will be covered by insurance. It's my understanding that maybe yes and maybe no.
The team that's working on the Joint Powers Authority replacement, agency replacement, has been talking about the financing that's connected to the pier infrastructure. And one of the questions we've asked of ourselves is how much is insurance going to pay for? And so the team is scheduling a meeting with the California Joint Powers Insurance Authority to have them come and talk to us face-to-face about what the authority is considering. The basic understanding or the basic premise is that the insurance will likely cover everything cost-wise that's related to putting the pier back into the condition it was before the fire, not including the building. So
what about utilities?
The structure of the pier, and it's my understanding, and David Spitz isn't here, but it's my understanding based upon the meeting that they are going to cover the cost of relocating the Edison transformer to the foot of the pier, or the base of the pier, I'm sorry.
That's my understanding, yes.
Right. And so that's why we want to schedule the meeting.
So that's hopeful.
Yes.
That there'll be money there.
Yes. And to your first question, the costs for the projects on the pier were refreshed in a separate meeting to council. So
I remember it well.
Right. So as far as we know, those are the most current costs. Obviously, they haven't been changed per your discussion with the CPI inflator, but we're fairly certain that those are good numbers, and the real unanswered question that you're asking is how much will be covered by insurance, and hopefully in the near term we'll have a better understanding. So whatever is covered by insurance, then the next logical question is, will that be freed up to go back into reserves? Yes, that money would be freed up to go back into reserves.
Okay, so that's a good thing to know. Also, I know that as far as ongoing goes, that we have some bond indebtedness that will be being paid off relatively soon, in the next couple of years, so that we know that we have some ongoing revenue there. The coastal plan, there's $80,000 in Tidelands and $240,000 in beach and pier. How much of that will we get back through the grant?
I would love to turn that over to Crystal to answer that question.
Crystal.
If I remember that number correctly, I believe it's about $180,000 that is coming from the Coastal Commission.
So about a little more than half of it will come back. What does that include? What does the cost include there?
That includes for a consultant to come on board to outreach, prepare a sea level rise adaptation analysis, create policies, and essentially put our entire framework and local coastal plan with an implementation policy along with it, submitting to Coastal Commission and getting that lovely process done.
And how long will this buy us a consultant for?
We have a 2-year period.
We have a 2-year period. Okay, how long have we been out on the benches on the beach? That was rhetorical. That was rhetorical. Thank you. What I'm concerned about is that in order to satisfy the Coastal Commission, that this is an entry-level amount that we've got going in there. So it's not pleasing to spend that much money on something that may not come to fruition if we don't work diligently within the 2 years to make sure that both parties get their work done. All right, I think that's all I have for the moment. What I would like to know is what staff and my colleagues think about a CPI adjuster, because that was a shocking meeting when we got the update on the pier. That was, I believe, before the fire even, wasn't it? Yeah, so that was very difficult. I would like to know about that. And I also would like to know from staff at some point, obviously not tonight, how much you will be coming to ask us for on the oil recovery.
The estimate when we came back, or excuse me, when we came to council the first time was approximately $120,000 for the cost, and that's a not to exceed amount for all of the different parts of the project. And from recollection and with discussions with prior consultants, there's a significant amount of money out there. The number that comes to mind that we were talking about is multiple millions. And it seems, although we would have to spend $120,000 and we're not 100% assured of the recovery, it is very highly likely that that the 120,000 plus a substantial amount more will come back to the city.
Well, and I think that's one way that we can look at getting more money back into those reserves again, which is, really needed. So I look at this year as a wake up and smell the coffee year, and we need to move forward with what we need to move forward with. And if we can find some things to move around so that we can take these things that are coming up out, then I think that's good. Otherwise, we're looking at quite a bit of money still coming out of reserves that isn't in the budget. So, all right, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Go ahead. Councilmember Moore.
Could you explain the citywide financial information system? And you have $190,000 for this year, $500,000 for next year, and then $100,000 the year after that, and then it nothing.
The system that the city currently uses is called Springbrook. Springbrook, well, actually it's by Acela now, was bought out by Acela, and it was a financial management system that was put in place for the year 2000. So we've had the same financial management system for that many years. We do some patching, but we have not ever moved up to the most current version. So in discussions with finance staff and in discussions with the Springbrook, now Acela group, we have been starting to set money aside so that we can migrate to the more recent versions of Springbrook. The cost of that has yet to be determined, and that's where we started putting the 100 and the 190. The future years are for conceptually that Springbrook is not a satisfactory financial management system for the city, meaning, and I think one of the questions you asked a long time ago is what kind of reports can we get out of the system? There's not a lot of reports that we can get out of the system because it's not user friendly. So the idea would be that we would migrate for a relatively small cost comparatively to the most recent version so we can stay up to date with the software. And then once that's done, start evaluating other financial management softwares, perhaps even more of an ERP type system that could be used citywide for other things besides financial management. And so that's why there's the $500,000 that's in the further out years.
So that would be a separate software, or
Yes.
potentially another software system?
A replacement for the current financial management system, yes.
Okay, and the 190, is that to kind of analyze the?
It's to migrate, to get someone to help us prepare a request for proposal and then manage that selection process. So that's why it's kind of all lumped together. We've been setting money aside in each of the budgets for the past couple of years to get us to a point where we'll be able to do all of those things.
Okay. Maybe we could set up a meeting, like, separate, just with you, and I could look at that. And on the IT, I know we're currently on a month-to-month IT contract with Synoptek. I believe that we can get better service at less expense, and I'd just like to direct staff to take a look at that, possibly as some alternative IT companies. And if we are tied in with this particular IT company, if we can look at possibly renegotiating. And then on the electric charging station, I think we should move that to the unfunded, because those stations would not be available to the general public. The new electric cars go over 200 miles on one charge, and it seems unnecessary and would only benefit a few people. I don't know what the rest of the council feels about that.
What was the budget for that?
30,000.
I think that's a good thing that we can put back into reserves, because we have so many other things that we need to take out. For instance, the 90,000 to help fund the 2 new police officers.
I appreciate the discussion, and we've had discussions ourselves. And the challenges that we have, not necessarily related to the charging station, because I think staff supports not spending the money on the charging station. However, since the budget has been put together, we've identified some health and safety issues at the Marine Safety Building. So the money's in the CIP, and what we are going to do after the beginning of the year is actually bring an item to council to do a project for fixing up the Marine Safety Building, and staff's recommendation would be to use that money to help support the cost of that work that needs to be done at Marine Safety. So we can move the project to unfunded, but I'd like to leave the money in the CIP so we have the flexibility to come back to you with a more appropriate project.
Would you be able to go ahead and make that shift over?
We don't have all of the numbers now, so we would not, I don't think we're in a position to know what the exact numbers are.
We have a detailed workshop for the headquarters, the lifeguard headquarters, scheduled for the next council meeting, and we're currently putting the numbers together. So we would like to present the numbers at that time.
So you want to put the budget through as though the electric stations are going to go in, and instead of just removing them and putting it, I don't know.
No. We want to keep the projects as they are and then come back and substitute a project after we have the meeting at Marine, regarding Marine Safety. The challenge that we would have is if we remove it, then we have to go through the entire process again. You know, we've done the public notice, we've done all of those kinds of things, the requirement for the public hearing tonight. So if we start taking things out of the budget, we're not meeting those requirements that we've told the public for the spending. So rather than pull it out and move it to another area, in my professional recommendation would be to leave it as it is, have the budget adopted, and then with that, after that meeting, bring the changes back to council and have the council take a formal action to perhaps cancel that project and add this project in as a replacement for that money.
Okay, so in the minutes, will it reflect that we're taking the electric meters out in, with an eye to using it in a different way?
So if the motion is made that we're amending the resolution to include that change, the minute will reflect that as part of your motion.
Well, I can't make that, right?
if I understand correctly, what the motion would be was to switch that to unfunded?
No, I think what Council Member Deaton is saying is we're going to leave the motion unchanged, but we want to reflect a discussion about the electric charging station and the idea that we're going to not complete that project but use that money for another project.
I don't think it makes sense to the public if they look at electric charging stations that are in there, and then we say, oh, no, that isn't right. That's not going to be in there. Well, yeah, it is. I'm looking at the budget right here. So that's why.
Any other questions?
Yeah, in October last year, there was a playground safety audit, and in this report, there were several items that were priority 1 items, and I asked for an estimate on this, and it was about $100,000 to fix the priority 1 items. And I'd like to propose we fix the priority 1 items that are identified as safety issues that affect all the parks. And I'd suggest a 3-year plan, or put about $30,000 a year. But instead of, I'd like to put it in the CIP as unfunded. Now, and when we review the CIP at our 6-month review, if there's money available, we would allocate funds toward fixing that.
So if I understand what you're saying there, that we'd like to add to the unfunded listing the priority 1 items in the playground. And then when we have a review period, if there's room in the CIP budget that we might consider moving forward on some of those projects.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, and it's my understanding that most all of the priority projects have been done other than the matting at the playgrounds. Is that your understanding, Director Miter?
That is correct. Then the matting has not been done.
Yeah, I actually looked. There's a little more. I went to Edison Park last Saturday, and there's more of the priority ones that were not fixed, but that is the main expense.
And that'd be wonderful if we could go ahead and update the unfunded listing for that.
And that, Steve, that would be similar to what we do for basketball court and tennis court resurfacing, where we budget for it on an annual basis based on a priority need. So there's a routine maintenance on an annual basis in the CIP.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it'll be an unfunded. It'd be unfunded.
Do we need a motion for that, or is that just a?
You can add that item by consensus before you adopt either one of these documents, if that's the pleasure of the council. You don't need a specific motion. If the mayor just wants to see if there's any objection to that.
Mayor?
Yes.
Do you have any objection to it? No, I have no objection to it. I'm sorry, I was taking notes.
I think
so
she's
we don't
supposed
forget
to ask
to-
us if we have any objections.
Do we have any objections?
Do we?
You said mayor. Okay. Do we have any objections?
No, I think it's a great idea. All of our playgrounds should be in top working order for our kids. And I like the idea of putting it off until we see if we have the money at the 6th month.
Absolutely, look at it in the
And then
future.
could we get also a consensus on changing the idea of the CPI adjustment on the public works?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Okay.
Tom, was it done now? Mr. Moore?
Yes, more?
The last item is in the CIP, there's about, I think we have 26 million on items that are it seems like a lot of them are placeholders. And I'm just wondering if we realistically know which items are going to be actually done.
I will happily turn that question over to Director Miter for his response.
I do have a list, and I have a list of about 14 projects that are solidly funded, and their value is at $4.6 million. And I don't have that list with me. I apologize. But I do have the list, and I can send it out. And it involves the concrete program, the annual slurry seal program, the annual pavement project, and of course the Westminster project will be part of that.
Yeah, just my question is, like, for the pool, if that's not realistically going to be done this next year, but it's in the CIP, shouldn't that be projected a few years out?
That is, that can be put.
I'll go ahead and jump in on that one. The pool has a designated reserve fund that was set aside by councils before this council. And so the money has already been set aside for a number of projects. And when you look at the CIP document, you can tell the age of the project by the project number. For example, Councilwoman Cesarsik brought up project number 1508. So that was in the 14-15 budget. So there are some projects that have been carried forward for a number of years. Now, specifically with the pool, Councilmember Moore, the challenge there is that we're moving at an iceberg pace, but we're moving forward, and we're waiting for approval from the folks over at the Navy for the new potential location. And in discussions with Greg Smith, who's the person that we're talking to at the Navy, he's indicated that it's moving forward at their pace also, and will likely occur within 2 years. So we're continuing to hold that money in the CIP because the council has directed staff to put that money set aside, and then once we get the final approval, then we'll start moving. So the part of the $26 million is made up of carryovers from prior fiscal years. And it perhaps might be a good discussion at some point in time to look at those carryovers and say yes or no, but we reprioritized all of the projects that were in the CIP last year, and pretty much every project was reaffirmed. It's just more of a matter of timing on when the project is going to get done. And some of them are likely to be done with financing. And if they are done with financing, say perhaps a project down by the pier, we might be able to use some financing. If the project is financed, then it would free that money up from the CIP to be used for something else. So rather than just go ahead and sort of say yes or no, is it a good project, since it's already been funded and is effectively taken into account as a carryover, then it makes sense that it would stay in the budget unless the council opted to cancel a project.
I'm not saying this take it out of the budget, I guess to budget it for future years, have it,
Savings account?
He's saying just move it over a year. Since you know it's not going to be done this year, move it over a year. The only thing I would say to that is that that started as a $5 million fund, and as the pool breaks, we pull money out of there during the year. What are you looking at? He's going, yeah. As the pool breaks, we take money out of that. So we don't know how much might come out this year in order to keep the existing pool going. But so I think what he's saying is we know we're not going to build a pool in 17, 18, so why don't we move it to 18, 19 when we think we might get approval? He's not saying to take it out and throw it in reserves.
It's actually just in carryover, so there's no anticipated expenditures for the pool this year. So it's part of a number that's been there for a number of years, and we've been continuing to carry it over. If there was a carryover project that was in there, specifically that have some of the designated reserves, then there's a page in the budget where you'd see the planned expenditures for that particular project. I happen to know that the pool, there's no planned expenditures this year, so we're just carrying that money forward.
Well, I mean, the other, like, if we have 4.6 million projects that we're going to do, and there's 26 million, obviously we're going to carry over quite a bit.
And the 26 million, part of that 26 million is inclusive of the carryovers. You're correct.
Yeah, what I was just saying is if we budget it over multiple years, it would look a little more realistic.
Understand.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of points. Thank you. As far as the two police officers, I'd like to echo Councilmember Deaton's comments about needing a long-term plan. I'm definitely hearing a lot of feedback from residents about getting more police officers. I think it's a good idea myself, but I think we have to look at the long-term plan. 1 year is great, but what's going to happen for the next 25 years for that matter? So if we can continue that, that would be great. You know, where I work, we have an escalation rate for the capital improvement cost, and it's 3%. So we, you know, if we say it's going to cost $3 million today, and we know it's going to be built next year or the year after the year after, we put that factor in for every year. And if nothing else, it kind of highlights what the true figure may be in the future, because it looks like $3 million right now, but we know how time flies around here, that it might be good to kind of do that.
Well, that's what happened to us on the pier.
On that, yeah. So it's obviously nice to look at that. What I've noticed a lot is the contract professional items. Some of them seem a lot more descriptive than others, and I know we had a lot of dialogue going back and forth, and it seems like most of the questions have been answered, but they've all increased somewhat, and then a couple of the departments have created new items, if you will. And I guess I just read the one wrong with the recreation programs at the beach, water watcher tag, and I guess it's recreation programs at the beach and water watcher programs, right? I mean, it's not just one. It seemed like it was one long sentence. So, but that's a new item that we're introducing and a new cost that we're introducing.
The water watcher tags actually were something that Marine Safety Chief Bailey told the council about recently. So now we're incorporating that as a regular occurrence in the budget. So we are now calling it out and highlighting it. The other costs, the recreation programs at the beach. So if you might recall a discussion where we talked about, and this goes back to the State Lands Commission and the lease, we've had to attribute all costs that occur in that Tidelands Fund. And so what this cost is now, this would normally have been in recreation, but because these are classes that are held specifically at the beach, for example, the surf camps and those kinds of things, these are instructor costs that are connected to those programs that are offered through the Rec Guide. And we've just shifted the revenue to Tidelands, and we've shifted the related expense to Tidelands. And so that's why specifically that one has changed this year.
Okay. And also with the oil revenue, I think that's an important thing that we should aggressively seek and get that to the table as soon as possible, as well as the pier insurance. I mean, it's good to highlight what we are getting. I know we've been talking about it for a long time now, and I know people want things to happen, but it'd be important to see what the final cost is for that.
Agreed.
And refund on insurance. So thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have one other question that I would like to ask regarding the police officers. I know it came up at our coffee, I think it was last week, Vicki?
Yes.
About the discrepancy in the entering costs of police officers. And I know Patrick and I were discussing it earlier today that just looking at an entering salary doesn't tell you the whole picture. You have to look at the complete package with benefits and so forth. So you might have one city that offers $10,000 a year less for an entering salary, but they might get a lot more in what we call bennies, benefits. Where are we in the scope and the sequence of other agencies as far as what we pay entering police officers?
Chief Miller.
Severely underpaid. You shouldn't be referring that to me, but
Yes.
It's really relative to what agencies you're comparing us to.
All right, let's start with Los Angeles, since that was brought up at the coffee.
It's difficult to do that even there because they have P2s, they have P1s, they have different levels for every officer.
But an entering officer right out of the academy. What I found just Googling today was that LA starts at $60,000 a year and that we start at 70. That's just off the top of my head. I think anybody would rather come to Seal Beach than LA. I'm just guessing at that. I'm not done an official survey. But so it seems like LA would be paying much higher than we would because of the issues that they need to deal with that we haven't had to deal with, but are dealing with more recently.
I would say pay is essentially throughout Southern California is not just based on the dangers in the job. It's the economic situation. For example, cops in San Francisco, Silicon Valley are paid quite a bit because of the cost of living, as opposed to where they may be in Oakland, for example. It's considerably less expensive to live there than it does in San Jose. Therefore, the cops are paid accordingly. So it's really based off economics more than it is actually crime. So, otherwise you'd see LA, some work areas closer to Beverly Hills, and they're paid the same as the guys that are working 77th Division, some of the worst divisions. So it's really not based on that. It's really the economics. So living in Seal Beach is considerably more expensive than it does Garden Grove. But
we only have one police officer that lives in Seal Beach.
I'm sorry? We do not. We have one, yes.
So could we just take a look at that before we also go out to make sure that we're competitive and that we're getting the best bargain on an incoming officer as possible, because I assume we'll be hiring maybe out of the academy. I'm just thinking after all the talk we've had about, now enabling us to hire out of the academy and so forth.
Yes, there's retirement costs too associated with PEPRA and non-PEPRA employees.
Right.
So that's something we could consider in that 340. There's more training involved with the new officer that takes about a year to get them up and running compared to a lateral that will take 3 to 4 months.
Right. So I'm just saying if we could take a look at where we fall with other cities around us and, so that we're not overpaying for an incoming officer.
Understood.
Thank you.
Any other comments? My comments, I'd like to start with the 2 police officers. I want to make sure that they're going to be fully funded before we commit to anything. I don't know that there's value in putting them in the budget right now without some kind of funding. Knowing in the future that they'll probably be in there, of course they will be in there, but I just want to make sure that we can pay for them. And the longer that we know we can pay for them, the better off we'll be. 3 years is nice, but then what? I've been around this game long enough to know that PDs have hired people for these 3-year grant periods, and then all of a sudden at the end of the 3-year grant, they're scurrying around for money to keep their police department. And I just don't want us to be in that position. In terms of the CPI for the CIP, the Consumer Price Index for the CIP. Anyway,
capital improvement project.
I think that's prudent to add in a CPI index into the potential costs because we do take it out over a period of years, and that is a much more accurate way of knowing what we're going to be looking at, and then the staff doesn't have to do what they did last year, was update the cost of programs that we knew were coming up and we may not have the money for.
Mayor, may I ask a question and ask or suggest that we not implement it in this budget that we're proposing, but implement it in the next budget?
If it is clearly stated in the minutes that, because I don't want you to have to go through it all again. But if it's clearly stated in the minutes and it's remembered by the people who need to remember,
yes,
that it goes in next year.
I assure you.
Mayor, can we just direct staff to do that in the next budget?
Okay, then we will, is there consensus to direct staff to do that? Okay, there's a consensus.
Thank you.
When does, in terms of the local coastal plan that you were talking about earlier, when does the clock start that we have to put that together?
We would have until the end of July 2019 to submit an application, to submit the local coastal plan to Coastal Commission for their review.
It's my understanding that we have that money collected, 100 and whatever it is, for the consultant.
Mm-hmm.
That's only a partial payment, right? Partial cost to the consultant? Or is that $190,000? I didn't write it down.
It was $180,000, and that's the full cost of the consultant to prepare the draft and the application.
So
the $180,000 plus the $80,000 from the city will be the full cost to get us to the point of submittal of an LCP.
And when do we anticipate starting this?
We are already starting this. The consultant is already collecting data and preparing all of that information. We're going to be setting up a meeting with Coastal Commission staff within the next month or two.
Good. Okay. The general plan, you can tell I'm kind of a planning crazy person. The general plan, I know that we need to do that by law. I know we funded a portion of it, of its costs. Could you tell us what the status of that is?
It is something that we're going to have to do relatively soon. We have already started putting money aside for it, and I believe the last time we checked it was somewhere around $400,000. I believe that number would probably have to get a little higher before we can start that project. A lot of what we have seen is that $500,000 to about $600,000 is the general going rate for a general plan update. So we're still a little bit off from being able to get there, but we do have a fee that there's a dedicated account and we're collecting the fee. Yeah.
The climate change issue, is that related to the GHG? Is it all kind of tied together? It's greenhouse gas? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
It all goes together, and it will be part of the general plan when it's done?
Right. We're anticipating that that component is completed before the general plan update, so that we're showing compliance. The general plan update would require a climate action plan compliance with AB 32, SB 375.
Okay. I didn't know how much money we had. Still not enough. Okay. Those are my questions. What's the pleasure of the council? You want to adopt this?
I'd like to adopt the budget tonight, please.
Public hearing, Mayor.
Oh, this is a time for a public hearing? Yeah. Would anyone like to come up and comment on the budget? Is there someone out there getting ready to?
Yeah.
Do I see body movement?
Yep.
Okay.
I don't know, it's so late.
Good evening, City Council and staff, Robert Goldberg. Yeah, it is getting late, but I do appreciate the amount of questions and conversation and discussion that we've been having tonight about the budget and the CIP. I'm just a little dismayed that we're now hearing that because we've published the total numbers for the various accounts that were in the newspaper, that we can't change those account numbers. If that's the way it is, then we need to have these kind of discussions a lot earlier. This should have been a workshop. I mean, this type of discussion we're having tonight is very good. But then, just for example, the electric vehicle chargers, to tell the public that we can't cancel electric vehicle chargers because we already noticed the total amount of money for the CIP budget. There's something wrong with that. I can't speak to it legally, but we used to have 6, 7, 8 years ago, we used to have budget workshops where you laid out all the numbers. We went page by page, and a lot of the questions that you all were asking tonight, which were very good, those questions got answered in late April or early May. Similarly, the hand-wringing that we're doing over the police, I mean, I could go through the budget right now and give you $300,000. I could do that right now. What I handed out to you, this chart, this is the first third of it. $86,000 to $104,000 is the cost of it's in the budget right now to increase the hours for part-timers, to increase the hours in the city clerk's office, police aid, police crossing guard, and public works beach maintenance workers. That hasn't been discussed. It's not very visible because you can't see these changes in these part-time hours unless you compare the position allocation plan that's in the current budget to the one last year. And so, this budget doesn't show you the changes, and you have to go do that yourself. But this certainly, given that we have an $11,000 surplus, increasing part-timers by at least $86,000 was certainly worthy of discussion at our workshop, but it wasn't discussed. So this is half of one police officer right there. I've asked, I've submitted a list of 7 pages of questions, and I appreciate that they're quite lengthy, but a lot of those have to do with increases in various accounts that, if critically could generate some other monies. For example, the city manager contract professional, it's budgeted $35,000. In the description, the only thing that's in there is the Long Beach Transit, which costs $10,000. So what's the other $25,000? Why can't we cut the city manager's contract professional to $10,000? There's $25,000. On page 69 for the finance non-departmental, we increased the intergovernmental charges by $45,000. Now that includes your animal services contract, and that is going to go up maybe by $8,000, the 5%. But so I understand $8,000, but the other $37,000 increase, where's that going? There's some reference to LAFCO, and I mean, that hasn't been discussed. So there's another $37,000. Another example, and I can't go through all these, obviously, I don't have time, but page 71, city manager's information services. For the past several years, we've been spending about $72,000 on this account. That's the average. It does vary from $65,000 to $117,000. But this year, we're going to $152,000, which is twice the average for the last 3 years. Okay, that's 80,000 right there. Okay, so I mean, so that's 80, 37, that's 117, and 25, that's about 140. You know, here's another 100. And then, I mean, finally, the coastal grant for the local coastal plan, that's something that I raised way early, and I think the grant's for 200, she's saying 180, but regardless, that's not in the budget. And I asked that question way before the workshops, and the answer was, well, you know, what the city treasurer said was that's going to be a reimbursement. Well, you know, I actually called the Coastal Commission, because I wanted to know, where is that money? Well, what they told me, and this was as of a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2-3 weeks ago, was that the city staff and the Coastal Commission are still negotiating the terms of the contract. And apparently when you get a grant from the Coastal Commission, there's conditions, and you have to sign an agreement. And our staff hasn't signed that agreement. They hadn't worked out the conditions yet. And it's been much delayed, several months delayed compared to other cities. And in fact, you know, if we don't finish this thing and sign off on it pretty soon, they're going to give the money to someone else. That's how frustrated they were. This was as of 3 or 4 weeks ago. Now maybe the situation has changed. But that money, I mean, right now in the budget, the total for the local coastal plan consultant is $240,000, and it's partitioned in thirds to the sewer, the water, and the tidelands, which is fine. Okay, sewer and water, we're not talking about that tonight. Tidelands money, that's like general fund money. It's $80,000. It's budgeted. Now, if we would actually budget the 200 or 180 from the Coastal Commission, the Tidelands kick-in wouldn't have to be the 80,000 because the grant money would cover a lot of that. Maybe the Tidelands kick-in would be about 15,000, 20,000. So that's another 60,000. So I agree with Councilwoman Deaton. You can't pay for police using reserves, and the proposal that staff mentioned to you about the potential savings from the parking management plan, well, that's all CIP. Unfortunately, that's not an operating expense. The $650,000 or so you got in the budget right now for parking management, that's CIP. That's not operating. Similarly, the 90,000 cell phone, I think you guys identified, that's in reserves. So you can't use CIP money for operating expenses. Otherwise, the budget's not balanced. It's just not balanced, and you have to adopt a balanced budget. Of course, you know, if you want to do this in July or August, and then run a deficit, an operating deficit like we're doing this year, but, you know, several $100,000, you can do that. But that's, you know, I agree with all of you that that's not what we want to do. But you know, there are other places that we could have looked to ask some tough questions, and maybe some of these things that I've mentioned tonight, they may be fully justified, these increases. But and maybe we can have this conversation in July. Maybe we can still have this conversation in July. Maybe it's not too late. But I just think, you know, we really have to look at this thing a lot closer. And again, I'm just dismayed that now we're told tonight that, you know, we can't change account balances because of the notice. I think that's unfortunate. So the other thing I want to just throw out, and it's unrelated, is I'd like a little discussion about the rescue boat, the marine safety rescue boat. This time last year, this is a $440,000+ expenditure, and we were told that this was a critical piece of equipment for marine safety. You know, we have a boat. The boat's from 1976. It's old. Appreciate that. You know, so we were all sold that we need a new boat. When we budgeted $440,000+ from the vehicle replacement fund, and now with the revised budget coming out, it's not in there. It wasn't spent, and I thought, well, maybe it'd be rolled over. It's not rolled over. You can look at the vehicle equipment expenditures in the Tidelands fund, and the budget is $586,000. Which included the boat and some vehicles, and now the actual expected is 100. And so the boat didn't happen. And it isn't that they're just planning the boat and they're going to get the boat next year, because then you would roll that 440 over the next year. So, This is the largest piece of equipment that's ever been approved for purchase in this city. We were told it was critically important, and now they're just hoping that nobody notices that there was no boat party. I was waiting for the party. We were supposed to have that boat ready before Memorial Day, and so when there was no party, I started thinking, there's something going on with this boat. So I'd like a discussion as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. Are there any questions from the council?
I just would like to comment. First of all, I'd like to ask about the boat. Where are we on the boat?
The vendor's been selected.
Maybe I should ask you, when's the boat party?
Excuse me. The boat's scheduled to be delivered in November. Currently, we're a month behind due to the vendor we've chosen. They've been slow on the design. It's been an interesting process. This is the first time they've built this style boat, and so we've been hypercritical to make sure that it's done the way we want it, because we want this one to last another 30 years, like the last one did. So we're in the design phase now, working hard to make sure that it's going to be the perfect boat for our city. With that being said, it is a critical rescue item. In fact, currently our boat that we're using now, that was built in 1976, it looks like we're not going to be able to have it out on 4th of July. We lost there's a whole technical part, but a hydraulic valve in the transmission, and so it won't shift into reverse on one of the motors. So that's going on right now, and we're actually scrambling to get that repaired for this 4th of July weekend. And so I just say that to reiterate the importance of a new rescue boat with where we're at with the 20-year-old motors in our 40-year-old boat. And so we're working hard to make sure that we make our delivery time of November.
And so, Vicki, where is it in the budget? Where is it? Where can you find the number?
It's in the it's accounted for in the vehicle replacement fund, is where the money is set aside for that boat. So when the council authorized it, it was part of the vehicle replacement fund that was adopted last year. So those are authorized expenditures, and the expenditure still hasn't occurred. However, the money was set aside in the current budget year.
So, where would I look to find it?
Elena, do you have a page?
201.
Page 201.
So at the bottom of page 201, in this year's budget, there's been allocated $586,000.
Yeah. Under capital outlay?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. So there still will be a boat party. Well, under 2016-2017 amended budget, it shows the 586. Then over in the 2016-17, it says 100,000. Then there's nothing for 2018.
Right. So we're not budgeting any new money. The money is already accounted for in the budget for the entire boat.
Okay. So this is a problem with the way that accounting works for me, and this is why I can't get Mint to work for me, I think. So what you're saying is that the first year, 2015-16, we did $30,000, which looks to me like maybe it was a repair. Then we set aside 586 in 2016-17, and so that's still there. It's like it's concreted in there.
Right.
And then in 2016-17, we added another 100,000 to that.
We are expecting to spend 100,000, and that could be very likely for the marine safety, the truck that we ordered for
For a
Marine City
different,
when we did.
for a different vehicle?
Correct.
Okay, and so when there's nothing in 2017-18, what that means is there's nothing new that we're adding. We are only taking that money that was allocated in 16-17.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And then the only other thing I want to say is thank you for the chart. There may well be some places in the budget that we will, in fact, find savings as we go through it during the year. These particular things on this chart are direct services to the public, like beach cleaning, which I wouldn't want to, I'm glad we're increasing. The crossing guards, crossing our children, we do that at the school's request, I believe, and that's important. The police aid, I'm not quite sure what they do, but the city clerk, the executive assistant, what does the executive assistant do, Robin?
That information, that cost was increased because we have an anticipated leave of absence for our deputy city clerk, and we are hoping to gain assistance through the temporary part-time person doing her full leave of absence.
Right, and that's by law a family leave, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so anyway, just to comment on that. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the budget.
Excuse me just a moment. Could I jump in on a couple of things?
Yes.
Thank you. So to be clear, I'm not suggesting that the council can't change the budget. What I'm suggesting is because of all the work that we've gone through and the effort required to make changes that were suggested tonight, the preference is to move forward with the way the budget has been presented, and any changes will come back at a future meeting. For example, taking out the electrical vehicle segment. For clarity with respect to the crossing guard especially, the crossing guard level of staffing has not changed. There's the exact same number of crossing guards. They're being worked for more hours. The reason the crossing guard has been increased is so that we don't have to use the other parking control officers when there's a lack of crossing guard support at the school. So this is an operational way to cover what the residents are asking us for out of the school. So, appreciate that the budget has gone up, but just want to add some clarity.
Well, I just wanted to point that that's really resident, at resident serving. Yeah, I mean, the crossing guards, the beach maintenance, police aid, and certainly we have to comply with the Family Leave Act.
Right. So. And with respect to, for example, the increase in intergovernmental in Department 19, which is on page 68 and 69, the contract professional is, the intergovernmental is up, but there's increased prices for the school resource officer as well, which is specifically identified in the budget. And LAFCO is something, it's a local agency formation commission. The city's been paying that for every year since before I started here, and this year the cost is $4,600. So there are things being pointed out as perhaps expenditures that we don't need to make, that are actually clear expenditures that are well identified in the budget. And then finally, with respect to the city manager, yes, the city manager has $35,000 in the budget for contract professional. However, in the current fiscal year, the city manager was expecting to spend $55,000. So that budget has actually been reduced by $20,000, and the reason for the expenditures are clearly identified on page 48. Now, is the word miscellaneous maybe not the best word? Perhaps not. But what it does is allow some flexibility if something comes up, so there's money in the city manager's budget that we don't have to come back and say, council, we need to make an adjustment to the budget. And these are standard kinds of budget mechanisms that we use to allow, going back to the conversation earlier, a maximum level of flexibility to operate the city without having to come back to the council for every single item that comes through. So I just wanted to clarify those couple of points. Anything the council wants to change tonight, you provide us direction, we'll make all those changes going through the budget document. Again, I was just suggesting that if we didn't have to, it would be my preference to not have to make changes and ripple those changes through the budget document.
Well, the only one we're looking at is the the electric charging stations, and I think we're all fine with getting that done. I just don't like a document going out saying one thing when we know we're meaning another. That makes me very uncomfortable. We are not talking about adding the police officers tonight until we have a long-term plan, and so that's the only change I see, so unless I'm wrong.
That's good.
All right, so I'd like to move that we adopt this budget. I know it was a rough year getting here. I really appreciate the work that has gone into it. I appreciate the 2 workshops that we did have. I think that it's always that last night when we approve the budget that we get into this real frenzied turnaround. So I really appreciate your patience. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? I'll second it.
Just for clarity, that's adopting the resolution that's in the staff.
Resolution adopting the budget.
Can we legally make that change, that one change?
You can legally make whatever change you want. I think what the finance director was saying was best practice is to not do things like that on the fly. When we've sort of presented a document, there are a number of changes that have to be made to that document. That's how mistakes get made. I think I didn't perceive her to be saying legally you couldn't do it.
All right, could we make that one change then?
Which change?
The electric charging station.
Well, why don't we take the suggestion of the Director of Finance and let her bring it back at a later date?
And the minutes will.
We're going to publish a budget then with it in it.
And the minutes will reflect that the council is given direction to take that out and bring it back.
It's only one item.
That they'll come back at a later date and adjust that, so that they don't have to change anything in the budget right now.
$30,000.
Well, we know that it's going to get changed because we won't forget.
Yeah, it's perception. Okay, unless my colleagues agree that it should be changed tonight, so.
Pardon me? It'll be reflected in the minutes. And we have a really great staff that
we'll never forget.
Never forget.
We have elephants.
Okay, please vote. Okay, we have 5-0. Budget's adopted. There's no unfinished or continued business items. There are no new business items. And we're going to adjourn to the City Council meeting on Monday, July 11th at 5:30 to meet in a closed session if deemed necessary. Thank you all for putting up with us, and see you in a couple of weeks.